That was Stevie Wonder with Another Star from the 1976 album Songs in the Key of Life. You're listening to the Baller Skeptic Roundtable on August 5, episode 9 this time round, and I'm your host, John Le Bon. I'm joined as usual, live from Spain via London, Matrix Decode, who recommended that track. And Matrix, what did you make of that one?
Hey John, yeah, it's a really cool track, isn't it? Stevie Wonder, what a voice! I mean, what a vibe! Yeah, man. Looking forward to the show.
Yeah, I'll tell you the truth. I hadn't even thought to use that song until I heard it in your promo for this episode tonight. I loved it so much, I thought we have to play it tonight, which would have been much to the chagrin of another friend of ours, live from New York, David Weiss of Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole. David, I know you love Hot Chip, but hopefully you also enjoyed some Stevie Wonder.
That was very nice, very appropriate for our today's guest.
Certainly. Well, speaking of which, we better get straight to it. Our guest tonight uploaded his first YouTube clip regarding the Flat Earth on March 16, 2014, well ahead of the wave of Flat Earth material which has flourished online this year. However, the 30-second clip entitled Flat Earth Lunar Eclipse Explained was rather vague and cryptic, and it wasn't until December 25 of last year that our guest released his first proper Flat Earth video, this time entitled Galaxies Don't Exist. That video attracted thousands of viewers and helped to launch our guest's profile to become one of the most popular Flat Earth channels on YouTube today. Several dozen further videos have followed, including a feature-length documentary entitled They're Hiding Land, and even a pictorial book available in digital and paperback, which utilizes 3D illustrations to make the case that the Earth is flat. Today we're sure to cover a range of topics apart from the Flat Earth, because our guest has also created videos about raw food, financial enslavement, 9/11, and even the dinosaur hoax. We're pleased to welcome to the show, live from the United States, Stars Our Souls, a.k.a. Mike. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, we're very glad to have you on board. Unfortunately, we had some issues with the planning last week, so instead we rearranged the schedule, and we were joined by the Morgile, which was a terrific show anyhow, but we're so glad to have you on board, Mike, and I know for a fact that Matrix in particular has been following your work for a long time, so I'll throw straight to Matrix, and I'll let you get the ball rolling there, mate. Throw the questions to our friend Mike, and we'll get the show started.
Yeah, hey Mike, how's it going, man?
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cool, man. Good to have you on. Yeah, I mean, I've been really enjoying your videos for quite a while now. Look forward to everyone that you make. You cover lots of different subjects. I mean, not only just the flat Earth, but I mean, I really like your style, man.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, what sort of stuff got you into doing this kind of video making and flat Earth and whatever?
Well, that's a good question. I started out as well, this goes back a pretty long time when I was growing up. My father was into conspiracies, and I think that might have played a role in my development, as kind of, being a little bit skeptical about things. And he was really into the Greys, the Area 51, the Bob Lazar. I remember being where I can barely touch the key, and I was reading all about Bob Lazar. I used to watch Unsolved Mysteries as a kid, so when I was growing up, I was kind of involved a little bit in the conspiracies. Needless to say, I left my father behind because he doesn't go with the flat Earth, okay, or he's on the fence with it. So over the years of just Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, you name it, I was in it, and then I would slowly transition over to the next conspiracy. And so I was talking to a guy who I was out doing a protest. It was actually the Occupy Wall Street protest. And I was talking to a guy, and we got into this discussion about airplanes and how they keep up with the rotation of the Earth. And I told him it didn't make sense. And we got into this whole big discussion. And I went back online, went home, got online, and I found people talking about geocentrism, where the Earth is a ball, but it's stationed directly in the center of all the other cosmos. as far as the stars, the moon, and the sun. And so that immediately made sense to me, because I remember being as a little guy where I couldn't really make sense. It didn't make sense to me why I didn't feel a spin of the earth. And I always felt like, shouldn't we be getting dizzy from the 180,000 mile per, the 1,080 mile per hour spin? We should feel it. And so that led me on my journey into the flat earth. And so I went from the fake moon landing, and I actually did videos probably 4 or 5 years ago. I have some fake moon landing videos and nuke hoax videos where I was saying how the nukes don't exist. And I took those videos down because the first guy who put out the video, his name was he was actually the second, but his became the most popular. His name was Jesse Wan, and it was called normalised.com. And I actually became good friends with him online. He ended up taking the videos down because he had pressure put on him. And so now it's funny. Now he watches my videos when I was watching his. So, that's kind of how I kind of came to Flat Earth. It was a slow transition in. I knew about it long before I made the videos, and then when I finally made the video, the one that you're describing about the lunar eclipse, I put that out there in a little sloppy way because I kind of felt like no one's going to watch this, nobody really cares, people are going to think I'm crazy, so I'll just put it out there. And it was like, I don't know, like a whole year and a half since I released my other video, which I decided, you know what, I'm just going to get in it, I'm just going to start, telling the truth, and whatever, I'll take the ridicule. I did that, but even when I was in the flat earth, started learning about the flat earth, I always thought there was an edge. And then I came across Math Boylan, who said that, the land keeps extending on and out, that there's more land. And he's the one who planted the idea in my head. So that's pretty much how, I got to this. Now, I'm not saying there's an extended model. There could be a edge, and we're going to talk about that later, but that's how I got to it. Yeah.
Cool, man. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a real journey you've been on there, man. It's like
right.
Yeah. I mean, the whole conspiracy truth field is sort of a big intro into this whole subject matter. It's like preparation for it. Right.
I mean, it was just like, it wasn't like a light bulb went off. It kind of took time. I was kind of in the doubting phase. I was like, well, it may be geocentrism. I got with that really fast, but when it came to the flat Earth, I still had my doubts, because I was wondering if the moon appears to be spherical and the sun appears to be round, then the Earth has to be round. I automatically made that assumption. And then I had to really think for myself and say, wait a second, I never actually saw this Earth with my own 2 eyes. And come to find out that NASA and all their photos are composites. So now here we have no photos of Earth at all. Okay, I always wondered how they were able to capture these deep, far, distant galaxies, which we're going to get into in the next subject, but that's pretty much how I got into it. I can't really remember the exact moment where I woke up and I said, it's flat. But I do remember that slow transition in where it was kind of like, I doubted, then I did a little research, and then I doubted, and then I finally got to it. Yeah.
In the live chat, Mike, we've got more than 40 people watching live, and the Art of Quiet Bear says that he loves the shades. I should say for those listening to this on mp3 in the future that this is live podcast/vodcast, and we can see Mike over there. And you've got is that the Mercator projection map on your wall there?
Yes, this map right here. Oh man, this is going to send me on a tangent. So I'm going to leave this. I'm going to save this for the next questions. But yes, this is a standard map that everyone has in their house.
All right, well, we'll get to that one again later. And No One's Flower in the live chat says that she loves Nucleize. Now, you mentioned that you were involved, well, you knew somebody who was involved in running Nucleize. For those who aren't aware, Nucleize is the forum, Mike, that later became biglies.org that Ray West is taking over. Is that the same one?
I think so. I haven't kept up with it lately. I just remember it was Nuke Lies, and it was taken down and then brought back up by Revisionist. I think his name was Revisionist.
Yeah, Revisionist is Ray West. I think he's a British man, and basically when that forum was taken down, it dealt with, like you said, the Nuke Lies and a whole bunch of other lies, and it was a very in-depth forum. Once it was taken down, Ray West, the Revisionist, then re-uploaded the whole thing himself, but it's not interactive anymore. You can't post there, but I do recommend listeners who aren't familiar with it, go and check out biglies.org. I'll provide a link underneath this video on YouTube. Go and check it out. It is a wealth of information, and if you're not already familiar with it, I can tell you right now, you're going to love it. I want to throw to you there, David Weiss, live in New York. You're also a huge fan of Stars Are Souls. We've been so blessed on season 1 of this show to have so many big names in the YouTube Flat Earth movement, but it's fair to say, David, that you've been following Stars Are Souls a little bit more closely than some of the others.
Yeah, I came across him fairly early on, and I just loved his style when he's the video where he's standing on the pier, talking to people and just asking them, and he's just not judging their opinions, just throwing the questions out there, and it helped wake me up, gave me a little courage to go out there and talk to people. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was that video or maybe another one where somebody's saying, well, the moon is round, so why wouldn't the Earth be round? And and I get that with the that's one of the number one things that comes when people say, well, I looked at Saturn and it's round and I can see the ring. And what? I've looked at it too and it sure looks round to me. But what I always say is, yeah, but planets are planets and the Earth is the Earth. The Earth is not a planet.
Right. It's kind of like if you were standing in a forest and you were surrounded by trees. Would you think you're a tree? No, you wouldn't. If you were on a beach surrounded by sand, you wouldn't think you're a grain of sand. You see, so what I tell people to do is measure everything individually. Don't make assumptions. And I'm saying we have to go back to the true essence of what science really is. Because a lot of times we think that science is cracking open a textbook and reading some equations and formulas, and that's science. That's not science. Science is actually very simple. Animals in their own little way do science. So, science is just observing. That's really what it is. It's to observe. And so, that's the thing. I always tell people, just because what you see floating above us doesn't mean that the Earth is actually round.
Right. I always say to people, I say, are you a human? When they say, planets are round, why isn't the Earth round? I say, well, are you a human? And they're like, well, of course I am. And they go, well, are you a bird? I'm like, well, there's birds above us.
Right.
So I like it.
Yeah, I've heard every excuse there is when it comes to, I'm being ridiculed. I'm being, I got a profile, in case you guys want to know. The federal SCIA and all of them got my name. They got everything they need to know about me. They watch me through my iPhone. They watch me through my Xbox, my television. They're watching me. Why wouldn't they? If I'm telling the truth, then they're watching me. And it's not just me. They're watching Matrix. They're probably watching the show. That's just the reality of it. I'm exposing the biggest lie on the face. Not just me, Eric Dubé, Matt Boylan, Mark Sargent, and everybody else, all the other guys that are just coming into it. They're all exposing the biggest lie on the planet. They're being watched. We're all being watched.
The biggest.
And I have nothing to hide, so they can watch me all they want. They want to watch me watch.
You mean the biggest lie on Earth? You said planet.
Well, yeah, that too. But you know what? We still need to get an official, because if I say the biggest lie on the plane, it makes sense, but people won't, I don't know. I get that word just needs to get out of my head. Yeah. Even from time to time. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. You in your videos and on the show today, you touched on one of my favorite subjects where you said that what's beyond the ice wall, and I'm curious, what is your opinion? What do you think is beyond the ice wall?
Well, I'll tell you what, David, I promise we will come to that later on. We've got a few topics that we wanted to focus on today. We'll get to boats on the horizon, the so-called galaxy, and then various models of the flat Earth, and then we'll get into a general discussion. But I wanted to spend the first segment of this show, Mike, talking about your experiences going from a ball earther to a flat earther. You said earlier on that your father was into conspiracies, and that led you into the path of conspiracies. I think it's been similar with a few of the people that we've spoken to on the show so far. But you said that you've sort of outgrown him because he still believes in the ball, whereas you don't. Can you share with the listeners some of your experiences as you're doing your videos, as your friends and family become aware that this is what you now believe? Can you share with us what some of the reactions have been?
Okay, well, the interesting thing is everybody knows I'm the flat Earth guy in my city, period. Like, I mean, I can't go into a supermarket without somebody saying, "Oh, that's the flat Earth guy." They know who I am because I'm out. I go out in the open. You know, I used to work in a gym where I would just tell people, "Hey, the Earth is flat." Like, I didn't really bite my tongue. I kind of felt, you know, when I started learning about the flat Earth science, I was so excited that I wanted to tell everybody, you know? And so in my excitement, I was going around just spewing it out to everybody who would listen. So over time, people just got to, "Oh, that guy, he thinks the Earth is flat." And I get text messages from friends and family who will send me a picture of the Earth, and I'm telling them it's a composite, and we get into this big argument. But that's how I got into it. And I was going to start doing lectures where I actually went on a route and just started doing different lectures at different libraries and you know, just different places that will allow me to come in and speak. And I ended up getting enough views on YouTube. I kind of feel like, well, it's kind of pointless burning my gas driving around here when I can just go on the internet and do it. And so I gotten a lot of ridicule, a tremendous amount of ridicule. I mean, that's one thing I would say. I wouldn't say I gotten it more than others, but at the same time, I do, you know, because saying the Earth is flat is one thing, but then when you say galaxies don't exist, now you're taking a little step further. And so a lot of times people, they'll go with the flat Earth, but they want to keep their galaxies, they want to keep their evolution, they want to keep some of their theories. And so what I'm saying is that there are no galaxies, and we're going to get to that later, but that's my experiences with it. I decided, you know, let me put out one video. I put out a video called Galaxies Don't Exist. This is after I decided to come back and do it. Because I deleted a lot of my videos from years back, and I left that one that you're talking about from like 2 years ago, whatever. So I decided to put that one video out, and when I did so, you know, people started watching it, and I said, okay, that's cool. I did the second one, and I was kind of sloppy with it. Had I did those 2 videos today, I'd probably do it a lot better than I did before. And so when I put out the videos, my goal was to put out these videos and then quit. That was my goal, to put out 2 or 3 videos and then that's it. Just go back to my normal life. And people in the comment box said they wanted more and more and more. So I said, okay, I'll make some more. And then as I'm making these videos, I'm realizing that a lot of people, see, the thing is, we all are intelligent. We all come out of the womb gifted as human beings with logic. We all come out with logic. But as we go through the school system, they really beat it out of us. The idea of thinking for yourself really gets taken out of you know, when you're going through the school system. So you know, you're taught to learn, read, and regurgitate when test time comes, right? So the thing is that a lot of people they like the fact that I'm able to just drop a certain idea. At least I try to. And so that's when I decide to make more videos, and I try to keep my videos very simple so that, you know, a 7-year-old can understand it. You know, a 5-year-old can understand it. I don't want it to be too complicated. And a lot of times what they will do is that, are you guys there?
Yeah, mate, Wilson.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, the one thing that a lot of people will do, and these are what I call the gatekeepers, whether you call them shills or whether they're just people who deeply indoctrinated, what they want to do is bring you onto the big words, the 15-letter words, all the mathematical equations. They want to bring you onto that platform so they can defeat you there. Okay, so a lot of times my videos, I'm using basic grammar. I'm not the best well-spoken guy in the world. I don't need to be. I don't need to be able to speak the big letter words. I just 2 + 2 = 4. That's all I need to know. Okay, and so they want to bring me onto that level. Say, hey, you need to, be a real scientist, and that's why I got my lab coat on, because now I look like a real scientist. And so, that's the whole thing about it. It's just the constant attacks that come in. That's one thing. When you get into flat Earth, it's going to come. It's non-conformity. You're not conforming to all the other theories.
Well, can I say from my experience, Mike, I've had more resistance from the so-called truth community on YouTube to the idea of flat Earth than I have from people in my day-to-day life, because there's been a little seed planted in a lot of their heads that anyone who talks about the Earth not being a ball must be disinfo sent here to discredit us all. And unfortunately, a lot of people have bought into that. They don't seem to realize that in the eyes of those who follow mainstream media, we're already discredited because we don't believe that there were any children who got hurt. I can't speak for you. I just mean from my perspective.
Right.
There were no children who were hurt at Sandy Hook, at the Boston bombings. It was all a big stage show.
Yeah.
In the eyes of the masses, we're already discredited. This idea that not believing in the spinning ball makes it any worse is just ridiculous to me. So I've seen more pushback from the so-called truth community than I have from people in my day-to-day life. And I wanted to touch on, you mentioned that you took down some of your videos. When I was going through your catalogue getting ready for tonight's show, I noticed that you uploaded a video, at least according to the catalogue you've still got there, a video back in early 2014, so well before Eric Dubé released his book, certainly well before Mark Sargent's videos came along in February, well before this wave of flat Earth that's taken the internet by storm. So you were very much ahead of the curve in that sense. But then there's a big gap between that March 16 video and the one you released on Christmas Day last year. Can you explain what happened there?
Well, that's when I released the video, and I didn't want to say I lost hope. It's just I put the video out, and I did not think that, like, me sitting here talking to you guys, I never envisioned this. Like, I put out the video, and I was just like, here, I just threw it out there, just like if you take a rock and you just throw it out into the woods, and then you turn around and you realize a rock hit somebody. Like, that's kind of how it went. Like, I just put out the video, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll check back in a year from now, see what happens. And I put out the video, and people were interested. And then I had Jay Caligula, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's been doing flat Earth videos, before the Mark Sargent and the Eric Dubé and blah, blah, blah. And he came in and commented on my videos. So did Jungle Surfer. So, and I was big fans of Jungle Surfer, because Jungle Surfer at that time, I don't really know what he talks about now, but at that time he had the same kind of mind I did, where everything was up for question. And so that's why when he commented, it kind of made me feel good. So I'm like, okay, great. And then, I decided I was working at my job, telling people about it as usual, and I got fed up because I had to draw everything out on paper. Like, when I'm describing how the sun sets and why it doesn't shrink on the horizon, I had to draw it out and explain it. So it got tiring. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make a freaking video about the sun setting. I'm going to use SketchUp because it's real simple and easy to do, and I'm going to put that out there and see what happens. And that video, it started getting quite a lot of views. So then I'm like, okay, fine. People want to hear it. People want to know. And I looked at the comment section of how many people were like just shocked by it. I said, okay, let me do another one. And so that's how my videos came about.
Mike, for people like me who saw Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues and were instantly interested in going and doing more research, then we found Eric Dubé, the scientific arguments. For us, for people like me, it only took a few weeks, maybe a few months, to go from completely believing in the ball, having never questioned it, to having some serious problems with it and being willing to admit that publicly. Can you tell us how long it took you to go from being a ball earther to not necessarily being a flat earther, but being a skeptic? Was it a quick transition?
No, it was slow, and it was a very slow transition because I went from the standard heliocentric planets floating around, galaxies, a flat universe. Isn't that interesting? A flat universe with flat spiral galaxies. I went from that to geocentrism. So I was a geocentrist back in 2010. So that's a good 5 years from now. That's what I did, and then so it was a slow transition. So it was a lot of doubting, because I was asking. I said, how could they see if the Earth is flat? What about these planets? What about these observatories? They're getting all of these planets coming in. How do you explain it? And so that's when I kind of got the idea the observatories were in on it, and that's when I decided to go up to an observatory. I spoke to Matt Boylan on the phone. He told me, Mike, he says, when you go up there, ask these questions, because he had the same theory as I did, and we went up there. And I'm going to talk about Matt Boylan later, because me and Matt Boylan had a falling out, so we could deal with that later. But, yeah, that whole thing, I went up there, looked at the planets, came to find out this is the biggest conspiracy. And that's what I kind of feel like I've reached my pinnacle. I feel like I've reached the ultimate conspiracy. Like, there is no conspiracy bigger than this one. None. The Boston bombings, none of them.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you there. I've got some questions about that later on in the show. One of the reasons why I like to get the guests to talk about their own journey from being a ball earther to a flat earther early in the show is because a lot of our listeners have already done their own research, and they've come to realize, even if they don't believe the Earth is flat, they've come to realize the heliocentric Copernicism model has just got so many holes in it that it's very hard to keep on believing it once you realize. So many of our listeners know that, but many of our listeners, they're just interested by this idea that there are genuinely people who aren't Christian flat Earth creationists who are questioning the ball model. And I think it's important they understand that this isn't something where you just suddenly switch from believing in a ball to not believing in a ball. Your mind has been programmed for so many years to believe one way. You can't suddenly expect for it to change. It's something you have to give time and think about it. So you said it took you a few years there, Mike. I know that with Matrix, he and I have been talking about this now for months on one of the other shows that I've done in the past. And Matrix, I want to throw to you. They're just, for the time being, still focusing on Mike's path from being a conspiracy theorist who used to go to Occupy Wall Street to now being one of the leading flat earthers on YouTube. Matrix, do you want to add anything to this notion that it does take time? You can't suddenly flip from a ball earther to a flat earther overnight.
Right.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the kind of research people may have done beforehand. If you're into seeking the truth, and for me, this subject, it kind of came together when the pieces, all the pieces of the puzzle sort of came together with this one subject about the flat Earth. The NASA moon landing and so on, and and then you're looking at NASA hoax, NASA fakery, and the bigger conspiracy to control our minds and deceive us and manipulate us and so on. And it does take time. I mean, I've tried explaining this to people. You just can't flip overnight, really. I mean, there's so many aspects of this subject to contemplate. Really, seriously contemplate all of science. You've got to do the studying, you've got to do the research, and it takes time. And I think for someone like Mike, like 5 years ago, to be come across this subject, and gradually transition. There wasn't the amount of videos and like there is now. I mean, this whole new wave of flat Earth, research and investigation that's is really prevalent now. It's just that it's much easier to make that transition now, and to make it faster because there's material available to us, and there's different people putting out different ideas, and it's really taken off. And this subject is such a taboo subject, and it's not easy to bring this subject up with like friends or family and everyone like that. And Mike, in his videos, which I love about him, is he has the courage to say, I'm a flat earther, or I believe this, and I'm gonna stand up for it and speak my truth and so on. And this encourages me and more people to speak out, and I really appreciate that about what Mike's doing.
Thank you. And that's the and I also want to say I don't remember the exact moment where it clicked in my head. I don't remember. I just know that I was a geocentric. I can't remember exactly when it was like, it's flat, you know? Yeah, I wish I did know. Like, I don't know what was the main thing that did it. I think it was the airplanes keeping up with the, maintaining with the Earth's rotation. That's what I thought initially. So, that's kind of what did it for me. The airplanes. The airplanes did it for me.
Well, I hope that we can come back and talk about some of these main arguments against the bull later on in the show. Just wrapping up this first segment now, talking about the journey of going from being a Copernican heliocentrist to genuinely questioning. I want to throw to you there, Dirth, you've been quiet live from New York. Anything you want to add before we press on?
Yeah, just when I discovered the flat Earth, I was petrified. I kept silent to myself for at least 2 months. I started mentioning it to my podcast mates, and they rolled their eyes at me. And I didn't come out. I didn't say anything publicly until about 3 months in, when I was convinced the Earth was not a ball. And I figured it would discredit everything I've done. You know, my favorite insult and the worst insult I hated getting from the trolls when I would debate them is, hey, you're such a moron. You probably think the Earth is flat. That was my go-to insult.
Right.
And now I'm out there realizing that's the truth.
That's the truth. That's the truth. And talking about, I think it was Matrix who said this just a second ago, that he gets most of the ridicule from the truth movement. All right, he gets most of the ridicule from the truth movement. And one of the things that I think a lot of people get caught up in is that if they can't follow A, they have to follow B. And I'm telling people, don't follow either. Don't get caught up, because what they're doing now is setting up their in fact, they kind of already did it, but they're setting up their left versus right, meaning truth versus conspiracy, but they're both untrue. So in other words, you got the truth 9/11 truth movement, who believes that the towers were taken down by demolition, right? Then you have another group who believes in what the media tells them. They believe that, what they see on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, which are the three main channels here in the States, they believe in that. So what they do is they control both sides, because there is no such thing as government. Government doesn't exist. All you have is people, and you have people with authority, and certain people tell other people what to do. So what they've done is install their puppet leaders inside the flat earth movement, just like they do in third world countries. When they want to control a country, they send in their puppet leaders and then control the strings from there. So the leader will come in, he'll bring gifts, he'll greet you, he'll pat you on the back, he'll smile at you, but he's working for the international banks. And so that's pretty much how the whole thing is being operated right now. There's, I have shills that I talk to all the time. I know they're shills, but they're promoting the flat earth, which is kind of strange. I don't share all my information with them, but they're out there sharing, flat earth stuff. And I'm not getting into the shill name calling, but shills exist. Disinformation agents exist. They're all over the place. They're being funded. So that's the name of the game. I really don't too much focus on who's a shill and who's not. I just know they're out there. And so that's how it's being played.
Well, we might come back and touch on that later. If you're just joining us late, this is the Baller Skeptic Roundtable, episode 9. We've got with us Stars Are Souls. His name's Mike, and so far it's been a good show. We want to touch on a few topics before we get into that general conversation about the different personalities in the Flat Earth movement, if you like. And the first one we wanted to discuss tonight was boats on the horizon, because, Mike, in the pre-show you were saying that this was one of the main things that made you realize that the Bohr model had some serious problems. So do you want to elaborate for a few minutes on what it was that helped you to see that the boats were a big key to this whole problem?
Well, absolutely. I actually live about 5 minutes from the beach. I live in a city called Palm Coast. It's actually right on the coastline. And so I'm at the beach all the time, and a lot of times I'll have these tankers. shipping boats, and what they'll do is they'll line them up right on the water. But see, from the angle where I will be on the beach, you can actually see the boats begin to sink below the horizon, the ones that go further out. So the bottom of the boat begins to sink below. And so that I noticed with my naked eye, and then I got a telescope, and I went out there with my telescope, and I looked through, and the boats would reemerge. So a boat that you would see falling that's supposed to go below the curve, they would reemerge. And that to me was just like, I mean, I try to explain that to one of my friends, and he says light refraction. Doesn't explain anything. Light refraction is the button they press when they need to explain away some shit. They'll just say light refraction. They'll hit that button and the argument's diffused. No, you got to explain to me how these boats are coming back into view if they're supposed to be going around the ball. This is basic common sense. Like, there's no getting around that one. Not only that, the boat should be tilted. So a boat that's on the side of the earth, so to speak, will be 90 degrees away from it. So, or tilted away from it. So how come we don't see these things in real time? This curve that's supposed to exist is, you can't find it. I did research, found out that 13 states in the United States are completely flat, supposedly, according to the story. And Kansas being one of them, Florida being another. Yeah, so that's just how that is. Yeah,
that's a good explanation. We're still improving here, Mike. You'll have to forgive us. We're trying to improve.
Oh no, that's okay. Okay, well, while you guys do that, I'm just going to keep going until you guys stop me. Yeah,
I can. That's fine. I appreciate it. So for listeners who might be tuning into this Baller Skeptic Roundtable and they haven't actually listened to much material about this before, basically the argument, Mike, is that we're told as children that because we can see the hull of a ship disappear, that's proof of curvature of the Earth, that the horizon is actually the curve of the ball, if you like. And yet, if you take a telescope or a high-powered video camera and zoom in on these hulls that have disappeared, the hulls come right back. And, of course, that would be impossible if the hull was disappearing due to the curvature. The explanation is that the reason why it looks like the hull is disappearing is simply a matter of perspective. And in one of your videos, Mike, you focused on hallways and parks and long-distance roads, and you showed how these things look like they're disappearing into the distance, but they're not. It's just a matter of perspective. Do you want to elaborate on that for any listeners who might not be familiar with this idea?
Absolutely. Like, let's use trains, for example, and we're talking about perspective. If you're standing on a train track, or you're standing down a long street, or you're standing down a long hallway, what you would see is the hallway, depending on how long it is, if it just goes on, a mile, okay, we'll just throw that out there, a mile. If you're staring down the hallway, you would see the hallway, both sides of the wall, the ceiling and the floor converge. And so they will come to a point from your perspective. But if you walk down to the end of that hallway, it doesn't actually converge. So that's your eyes. So what happens is when you're standing on a beach and you see the sun going below my freaking cats. When you see the sun going below the horizon, what ends up happening is, and this is a huge argument that everyone has, and I'm trying to explain it the best way I can. The horizon, when you're staying at the horizon line, it always comes to eye level. That means that the ground is raising up and the sky is dropping down to meet right at your eye level. So this is where the ground and the sky meet. The sun is actually in the sky, right? Some say it's 3,000 miles up. It could be 400 miles up. I don't really know. But some measure it to be 3,000 miles up. When that sun is going down, and it appears it's going down below the horizon, but it doesn't actually shrink, what's happening is, the reason it doesn't shrink is because the sun is so high up, number one, and number two, the sun is so large. Okay, an airplane would literally shrink out of sight. If you were watching an airplane go towards horizon, it would shrink out of sight. But when you're looking at the sun, which is enormous, It's not as big as they tell us it is, but I think it's pretty darn big. You see it actually go below the horizon, because the horizon is 3 miles. Your eyes can see 3 miles to that horizon, okay? Can't see any further. Now, if the Earth's radius from the core is 3,959 miles from the center, there should be a curve at every 3 miles. There should be a dip, okay? So every 3 miles, it dips 6 feet. So 3 miles out, you're not going to see the sun shrink infinitely small. You're just not. It's not going to shrink out of sight. And so that's the reason why the sun appears to go, it's falling below something, because one, it's above you, and two, it's going beyond your vanishing point.
Now, for me, Mike, when I first heard this argument about the ships not disappearing the way that we're told that they are, this spiked my interest, because I still remember as a child being told that one of the ways that we know that we're on a ball is because that ships disappear. So even if we are on a ball, my line of thinking was, well, how come they could give us such an easily debunked argument? And what amazes me is how many people can give you reasons why they believe they're on a ball. You can explain to them, that's actually not a very good reason, let me show you why. And rather than think to themselves, gee, how could they have, why would someone make such a silly lie about being on a ball? There has to be much better reasons for it, and take that as a cue to go and do more research. They'll simply move on to the next myth that they've been sold. And for me, whether or not you think we're on a spinning ball, the fact that people are still being taught that ships disappearing is an argument for it when it clearly isn't, should make people ask some questions. And one person who's done some of his own research into this and made a terrific video, which I think is up to like 10,000 views, is my friend there in Spain, Matrix Decode. Do you want to elaborate on the test that you did for any listeners who might not be aware?
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I did a test, based on the Bedford level experiment, and, you're looking across almost an 8-mile stretch of sea to a lighthouse. And, some people want to, according to the curvature mathematics, there should have been 39.6 feet of curvature drop, and there should have been a big chunk of this lighthouse, which I was filming, should have been missing, and it wasn't. And you get the argument that it's light refraction, and when you go onto the Bedford level experiment Wikipedia page, they used to debunk that with a photo of Earth from space, but they've recently changed it and removed that section, and now it's all just apparently debunked by light refraction. And this is all like dependent on the temperature of the water and the air above it and so on. And there might be a minimal effect, but it doesn't account for the huge drops in that should be visible. And there's so many contradictions in these scientific theories. I mean, 1 minute light refraction, boats sink over the horizon, and the next minute, you have city skylines magically appearing thousands of feet above what they should be. They want to have it both ways, and it's just one of these arguments. I mean, light refraction itself, you're talking about mirages, which they claim these cityscapes, the skylines appearing magically are mirages. And when you talk about light refraction, what you're seeing with a mirage actually is more of a reflection instead of a refraction. So when you see like a mirage on a road, and you see a car coming towards you, what you're seeing is a reflection of the car upside down, if you like. It's sort of inverted, and we don't see those kind of things with these skylines over that are 50 miles away, like the one in Chicago, viewed from Michigan. And so there's some terminology being used like refraction, but what it really is reflection caused by the atmospheric distortion. And when you look at the boats on the sea supposedly disappearing, they go vertically, like Mike was saying, they go vertically down, and then the next minute you see them and they're in the sky, above the horizon, and then you see the reflection of the boat below the actual boat itself. So there's definitely some issues going on with what's going on at the horizon, the vanishing point, how far we can see. But the argument to say that boats disappear over the horizon is not a valid one.
Right. All my life, growing up in school, I was they put me in a special class where I would they thought I had learning problems. I don't have any learning problems at all. They said I was dyslexic because I didn't get the theories. Okay, I didn't believe history, but I mean, history class had been the worst thing in my life. Just absolutely boring. I knew half of it couldn't have been true or it was bullshit. Like I already knew automatically. So yeah. Anyway, we could go into that later, but yeah.
Hey, I want to talk about the sun going over the horizon. The sun is, if it, let's say it's 3,000 miles away, that's considerably above the landscape. So that horizon for the sun would be a little farther back, right?
No. If the horizon was any further than, well, when they say 3 miles, that's a rough estimate because everyone has different level of eyesight. Some people have 20/20 vision. Some people have, if you're talking to an elderly person, they may only see 2 miles to the horizon. Some may see 4 or 5. But let's put it in the ballpark of 7 miles. The sun, if your eyes were strong enough, you would literally see the sun shrink into infinity, shrink out of sight. You would literally see that if you had strong enough eyes. The problem is our eyes stop at the horizon line, which is 3 miles out. It could be 7 miles out, even 10 miles out. But 10 miles is still really not that far.
Right.
And so when the sun goes beyond that point, the sun is moving away from you, but your eyes can't see further enough. Your eyes don't give it a chance to shrink out of sight.
So I want to take that a step farther. There's a lot of scientists that talk about how you can't see light until it hits something. You can't actually see the light source. You don't see light in the air. You only see it when it hits dust, when it hits a wall, when it hits a tree, or when it hits the atmosphere. So the sun could be 3,000 miles away, but what we see is the sun on the top of the atmosphere where it first hits the atmosphere, which is much closer than 3,000 miles. Right.
Absolutely. Now, that's a great point, is that you can't see light unless it's touching something. So what you're saying is that since it's in the atmosphere, it gives a physical, we're able to see it because it's hitting something. And yes, I think I agree. That's very possible. The thing, to me, everything's up in the air. I always tell people, and this is what I tell people who ask for my opinion, the greatest secret on earth, the greatest secret known to mankind is that there are no secrets. That's the greatest secret. There are no secrets. The secret is hidden in plain sight. It's right there in front of your eyes.
I agree with that.
The problem is we just not looking. We see a lot of people get caught on the conspiracies of the holograms and blah blah blah, and that all that may be true. But the problem is that we need to get back to using our 5 senses: our eyes, our ears, what we feel, what we can observe. And so the biggest secret is not some hidden cabal, up in, Washington, D.C. or something like that. It's right in front of our eyes. There's so much we can learn and just observe, just by observing. Just when you're going out to grab some coffee and you're going out to the supermarket, just observing will teach you so much. And a lot of people, because they're fighting through traffic to get to work or take the kid to the babysitter or whatever, they don't really have time to sit down and really think. So that's one of the biggest things. The biggest thing is the truth is hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems to be, all around us. I mean, there's one thing we've been taught not to, pay attention to what we see, what we sense, and what we experience. Right. And we've almost been, completely indoctrinated against to trust our feelings and our senses.
Right. Right. Like, I mean, all our lives, all we've ever seen was a flat horizon. So right there, your eyes are telling you the truth. Your eyes are telling you the truth. The people who are lying are the people who have agendas and motivations. So, but our eyes, they're telling us the truth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, I mean, they're supposed to be spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, and they're being held down by gravity, and Water is supposed to be curving everywhere, which it doesn't.
Right. And I just want to add this in really quick. The boats falling below the horizon is one huge thing. The second thing that nobody can get around, period. I don't care. And see, this is why I would love to debate Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku, Richard Dawkins, all of the big name guys. Get me on stage with them, because I got a question they can't answer. And they can't use light refraction. They can't get away with it. And that thing is what I put in my book, is that the fact that you should have to push the clocks back 12 hours every 6 months. We don't do that. We do daylight savings time for an hour, and then we reverse it back for an hour a little bit 6 months later. But every 6 months, we're supposed to be flipping the clocks 12 hours. Now, my perspective, his name's Rory Cooper, he did a video on this. I did a video on this, and if you watch his video, it's perfect, because he's showing right there that there's no way that you can have the Earth spinning, going around the sun, and not be able to push the clocks back. You have to do it. There's no getting around it.
Yeah, I mean, this is to do with the conservation of angular momentum, apparently, of how the axis tilt of the Earth, is tilted. The poles, is tilted 23.4 degrees, and it maintains that axis and that angular momentum all the way around the sun. So, like you're saying, every 6 months, midday should become midnight.
Exactly. Because the Earth is now on the opposite side of the sun, and it still has to do its 360-degree rotation on its axis. So,
Mike, couldn't that be accounted for by the sidereal day versus the solar day?
No, absolutely not. Because the sidereal time, what they're talking about is that the Earth rotates 23 hours and 56 minutes. So that 4-minute differential every day will add up to 12 hours after 6 months. So this is the excuse they use. But here's the problem with that. You have all of these clocks, like the Big Ben Tower, all of these grandfather clocks, where it does the hands on a clock do a full 360-degree rotation every 12 hours. Now, if the Earth was spinning, doing a full rotation, doing a 360-degree rotation, 23 hours and 56 minutes, then those clocks that you see, their dials will be off 4 minutes every day. And so the first day it'll be 4 minutes, the second day it'll be 8 minutes, and it will quantify after that. So there is no I looked at this thing good before I decided to make a video on it. I made sure I wasn't going to make a fool out of myself. I looked at every single analogy. There is no way. That clock should have to be flipped back 12 hours after 6 months. Sidereal time, whatever excuse they're going to come up with has so many holes in it. Look at the Foucault pendulum. That does a full 360 degrees after the 24 hours. Am I correct?
I think so.
Right. Why isn't that off 4 minutes or 4 degrees? How come? If the Earth is doing a full 360-degree rotation every 23 hours and 56 minutes, then all the hands on the clocks will be off. The Foucault pendulum will be off. You see what I'm saying? The hands on those clocks do a full 360-degree turn every day.
So what I've done here is I've brought up an image from Google that's in regards to this sidereal day and the normal day. Now, I'm not sure if you can see that in the browser there. Mike, can you see the image that I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Now, for the benefit of listeners who are listening on MP3 or don't have the screen in front of them, what we can see here is the sun, a depiction of the sun, obviously not to scale, the Earth in 2 different positions, and it says here that the Earth completes 1 rotation per sidereal day. After 1 day, the Earth has revolved around the sun by approximately 1 degree. So, after the Earth has revolved around the sun, it needs to rotate a further approximately 1 degree to bring back the sun in line solar day. So, do you want to expand upon that?
Absolutely. The Earth, what they're saying here is that the Earth will have to do 361 degrees on the first rotation. Then the second rotation will have to do 362 degrees. So every rotation, it would have to add an extra degree. So that once it got 180, the Earth, I'm talking about on this green line here, once it got to the opposite side of the sun, your 12 p.m. will now be 12 a.m. And so what they're trying to say is that sidereal time, to me, it's hard to even explain because it makes so little sense. Because what they're saying is that the Earth rotates 23 hours and 56 minutes. It does a 360 degree. But it can't do that because all the clocks will be off, like I said. So, and it can't do an extra degree of a turn because it just wouldn't do it. It just wouldn't make sense. So, I mean, I hope that explains it. It's really simple. The hands on the clock, if you can imagine, let me just say this really quick. The hands on the clock, when it goes around every 12 hours, okay, it's doing a full 360 degrees. So imagine that hand being the rotation of the Earth. If it was to do any more, any less, the hands on the clocks would be off. We won't even know what time it is. And all the animals, the nocturnal animals, now their biological cycle will be off. So they'll be sleep during the daytime and wake at night, and then wake at night and sleep during the daytime.
So what one of the qualified academic experts would say to you, Mike, is that the 24 hours times 60 minutes times 60 seconds that we use to count today, that we use to count every day, that is set to account for 361 degrees of rotation, not 360, wouldn't they?
They would say that, right, they would say that the Earth is rotating an extra degree. But see, it's easier if I actually drew it out. It's so simple, but so hard to put in words for people who are not familiar with it. The Earth can't be...
I understand what you're saying, and this wasn't a topic that we originally meant to get on. In fact, what we might do is we might come back to this one later on in the show. Before we do, I better go to Matrix and to Dirth to get their thoughts. So, Dirth, you've been quiet. Do you want to add anything to this sidereal day versus solar day discussion?
No, I was going to ask the exact same question with you. Maybe every 24 hours is 361 degrees of rotation, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
Peace Through Truth says that for him, one of the biggest giveaways that the Bohr model doesn't work is the fact that the polar star, the North Star doesn't appear to change over time, and it should do given the precession of the equinoxes and that kind of thing. So we might come back to all of that later on. But Matrix,
I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to add just one point. If it was doing an extra degree of turn, then you would have to add an extra degree of turn on the clocks too. The clocks are in sync with the rotation of the Earth. So that as the Earth turns, they're both going boom. They do 360. They're in sync with each other. If one is off, then the clocks have to be off.
But you can't have a rotation in relation to what? In relation to a spot on the sun, or relation to space?
All right, let's use the Big Ben clock, or let's use a clock where you have the hour hand and then the minute hand. That minute hand would have to do a full 360 degrees in order to keep up with the rotation of the Earth. It can't do any more or any less because the clocks will be off. It's easier for me to show it, but yeah, I don't want to spend too much time dealing with it because we'll come back to it. We'll definitely come back to that later on in the show.
Yeah, well, I think this has to do with the conservation of angular momentum. This is the big issue. I mean, if there wasn't this conservation of angular momentum and how the Earth's axis maintains its position. Now, if that varied and altered and followed the sun in a way, tilted inwards and changed its tilt, then you could argue that there shouldn't be this 6 months difference. But because it maintains its conservation of angular momentum, the rotation is consistent. The 360 degrees rotation is consistent like that. So this is the problem with their model, one of the problems. And also daylight savings doesn't account for the 12 hours difference that should occur over 6 months. And other related issue points to this, the moon phases should also swap over every 12 months.
Right, that too, the moon phases, right, absolutely.
And then we also have the idea of how the North Pole is facing Polaris, but yet like 6 months later, it's on the other side of the sun, and the tilt is still facing the same way, so it's pointing away from Polaris. It's like a couple of 100 million miles away on the other side of the sun, and yet for some reason we're still, we're still getting Polaris above us.
Right, and they'll say that because Polaris is so far away, you can't actually see any sort of not parallax, but any sort of movement. You can't see the any movement from over the North Pole Polaris. So he's saying it's so far away, you can't see any variation in any change in its distance or any sort of movement. That's what they say.
Yeah,
supposedly, it doesn't make sense.
That's the idea that Polaris is so many light years away. But I mean, even if you like changing, the Earth moves I think it's like 200 plus million miles on the other side of the sun. The angles are changing, and you're going to be pointing at something different. You're not going to be pointing back up the other way, back to Polaris. They can't explain it. This is a big problem with the whole globe model, and journalism has also been doing something on how the stars in the night sky. On one side of the sun we're seeing in darkness, we're seeing one lot of stars, and on the other side we're seeing another lot of stars. So there's problems with this whole model, the globe model.
Oh yeah.
Matrix, with your conservation of angular momentum thing, can I just for the listeners because a lot of these concepts are going to be very new to people, even some people who've been doing some research. So am I right in if I'm trying to be concise here, you're saying that if the Earth is spinning on its axis at a certain speed, that doesn't fit in with the Earth also being on an eclipse around the sun, because if it's on an eclipse, then there'll be periods where it would have to spin slower or faster to still maintain the 24 hours night and day. Is that where you're going with that?
Absolutely. The Earth... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go on, Stars. Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. The Earth would also have to pick up speed. I mean, if you want to keep up, there's so many holes. See, that particular theory or concept has to be really drawn out. It's hard to put in words because, especially for someone who's new to it, that one has to be kind of drawn out. So I'm gonna kind of go into some other proofs, like for example, lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse, a lot of people think that is the smoking gun to the round Earth. The lunar eclipse is it. But the reality is that there are so many different type of eclipses. You have a lunar eclipse, you have a solar eclipse, and you have horizontal eclipse along with a whole list of other types of eclipses. And a horizontal eclipse it's fairly common. The sun and the moon are both above the horizon at the same time. So if you're in Canada, for example, you may see the sun and the moon both in the sky at the same time, but the moon is being eclipsed by a black object. Now, obviously, it's not the Earth, because if the sun and moon are above the horizon, that means that the Earth is no longer causing an obstruction. The Earth is not between the sun and the moon. And so that's another one. That kind of gives it away.
Well, let me just read out a few comments from the live chat, Mike. We've got more than 70 people watching live. Cy Obstacles asks, is this the season finale? No, it's not. We'll talk more about that at the end of the show. Matty V. Phuket says that you're a terrific guest, Mike. He thinks you're the best that we've had so far. He says you're awesome. Gav Nah says that they want to have their cake and eat it too. And this is the case with a lot of the problems, including, say, Coriolis, which apparently affects bullets but doesn't affect planes. They'll let you believe that something affects it once, but it doesn't affect it in other cases. It happens over and over again. Beyond the Ice Wall says that he's in Australia and we see the Southern Cross all year round. The Southern Cross is a constellation. It's on our flag. It's meant to be significant down here. And he says we see it all year round, but that should be impossible on the heliocentric model because it should be blocked by the sun for 6 months of a year. And this is something that I've noticed a lot of people talking about lately. I'm glad that they are. Imagine, listeners, if you will, that we can only see the stars when we're not in sunlight because the sun lights up the atmosphere. That's why we see stars at night. So when we're on the opposite side of the Earth to the sun. We can see the stars. That's fine. 6 months later, the opposite side of the Earth to the sun will be looking at the opposite side of the universe. So how on earth could you see the same constellation all year round? It doesn't make sense. I'll say, Mike, with the greatest of respect, the sidereal problem, for me, that's not really... I can see how the heliocentrists could try and explain that away, but I can't see how they explain away seeing the Southern Cross, in our case down here in Australia, or the constellations that you guys see. I can't see how they can explain that on their model,
Right.
and I've looked for the explanations. I can't find them. Gino down there in Melbourne says, holy cow, I can see it now. You put it well. This is the thing. I can try and explain something, and I might explain it poorly. Mike can try and explain something. He might explain it better. Matrix can try. Dearth can try. I think it's important that people, if someone explains something and it doesn't make sense to you, don't be afraid to ask questions. And if someone can't explain it to you, then ask somebody else. Or don't let one poor explanation put you off the track. Because I'll give you an example, Mike. When I first looked at this flat Earth thing, a lot of it made sense to me, but I couldn't get my head around the sun. How could the sun set on a flat Earth model? And it took me weeks of trying to get my head around it before the idea of perspective came to me. Now, if I had have seen your videos or Rory Cooper's videos earlier on, it might have come to me quicker. But the videos that I was watching just didn't explain it very well. Now, if I had given up at the time, then I'd probably be a ball earther sitting on the sidelines throwing peanuts like the peanut gallery do. But instead, I stuck with it and eventually got my head around it. And I think it's important, I want your opinion on this, Mike, that people do have patience. If I explain something poorly, or if you explain something poorly, it's easy just to walk away and say, stuff it, I want to believe in the ball. But these things are worth trying to get your head around, because you're up against 20, 30, maybe 50 years of indoctrination. It's not always going to come quickly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, where can I start? I mean, there's so much proof. Like, for example, actually, I'm gonna leave planets alone, because I don't know how far some of your audience may be with the flat Earth. So I'm gonna hold that and just kind of deal with the flat Earth for now. And the galaxies. The flat Earth, there's so much proof. We don't know which model we're gonna go by, so we'll hold that for later. Yeah, there's just so much proof. I mean, when you're talking about the spinning Earth, you're talking about why isn't the water? Now, water never lies. You know, water always flattens out. So the ocean, when you look at the ocean, it's generally flat. I mean, besides the waves and what have you, but it's overall flat. The ocean is telling you that we live on a flat Earth with a rough surface, and I want to tell people that too, because a lot of people say, well, there's mountains, there's hills, there's valleys, there's canyons. We live on a flat, just like if you were looking, you had your head down next to concrete. And you know how concrete is not really smooth when you zoom in up to it? That's exactly what I think we live on. We live on some sort of rough surface. So you and I are living kind of on a hill, and the water runs down into the lower areas. So well, the water is always flat.
I hate to interrupt you there. Please forgive me. I want to spend a lot of time, because I know that the model that you follow with the flat Earth is a little bit different to some of the other leading figures on YouTube. So I promise we will come back to that. I just wanted to spend a bit of time, we've kind of already touched on it, but looking at the problems with the galaxy. Now, just a moment ago, we were looking at the problems with the solar system, but of course the solar system is just one of many millions or billions or trillions, whatever ridiculous number is in the textbooks today, of solar systems in a greater system called the galaxy, the Milky Way. Some of your videos touch on the problems of the galaxy, so you don't spend a few minutes right now going through some of the major ones?
Sure. The galaxies, now I don't retain all of the names of the galaxies. I don't feel it's necessary. Once I came to the conclusion that they're not real, I didn't need to know how big they were, how many light years away they were. Once I figured out that they're all composites, they're all fake, then I just rubber stamped them all. I said they're all BS. And that's what you would do, because once NASA loses credibility, your credibility is done. You lie to me 3 times, I'm not going to believe your 4th lie. Okay? If you tell me something the 4th time, you lied to me 3 times, your credibility is gone. So as far as those galaxies concerned, I looked at enough of them. If you go to any bookstore, crack open a book. Go to a bookstore and crack open a space book. right? And just look at the different galaxies. They'll be really pretty, but scroll down to the bottom and look at the bottom of the picture. They will tell you that these photos are either composites, mosaics, or what they are is computer rendered images, meaning they're just made up on a computer. So none of the galaxies are actually what you're looking at are actually real. In fact, they tell you that all of the galaxies come in black and white. And once they get to the NASA offices, they fill them in with color. So that should tell you right there that even when you're looking at the color, the color's not real. And NASA tells you that. So NASA's very open when they tell you that their stuff is kind of BS. It's all about just really looking at it and reading it. Because a lot of people, they'll get they'll get excited to see the picture, but they don't actually read it. So I'm thinking most people don't. So at least I didn't. When I saw the pictures, I was like, wow, this is great. A galaxy. Look at that, 12 billion years away. Light years from us. So I was happy about that. But then when I started reading it, I'm like, wait a second. This says it's not a real photo. This says it's a composite. And then when you go through it, and anybody can do this, go to your local bookstore and just open up a space book and just take a look at it. It'll either tell you at the bottom of the picture or you go to the back in the index, and they'll tell you all the photos been altered. They can't actually take a snapshot like you would do with your cell phone. Yeah, so galaxies aren't there. Yeah.
Mike, I'm so glad that you bring that up, because that was another thing for me when I still thought the ball model was okay, but I heard these problems that were brought up by Dubé and by Sargent. This is one of the things that got me, where I thought to myself, even if we're on a ball, I have to look into this. Why is it true that they're all composite photos? Because if it is, that's significant. I looked into it, and sure enough, you're quite right. These photos are all composites, and then you start to think to yourself, why on earth would that be the case if they've genuinely got these amazing telescopes on the Earth, and then, of course, the so-called Hubble telescope out there in space? If they've actually got access to this technology, how come the photos, once you start questioning if they're real or not, look so obviously fake? Dirth, I want to throw it in there because you've been quiet. This is, I think, one way that's easy to broach with the regular person, to ask them, hey, we're living on a spinning ball. They've got thousands of satellites up there. They sent six missions to the moon between 69 and 72. How come all the photos of Earth are composites?
There's no explanation for that. I mean, there's tens of thousands, depending on what number you look at, of satellites. We have all of these missions that are flying to other planets, supposedly taking ridiculous pictures. Why wouldn't they take pictures of Earth, from a distance? Why wouldn't they have a camera on the moon? We've talked about it. I mean, the moon is the perfect platform, supposedly. It faces Earth the whole time. You couldn't set it up any better. We could watch the Earth spin. We could learn about our weather systems. We wouldn't need satellites. We would just need one camera on the moon streaming a picture. It doesn't happen because it doesn't exist.
Right.
Because everything is a lie. It's that there. If you look into that one topic long enough, that it blows up their entire model.
Right. The galaxies there, and here's a funny thing. A lot of people say, this flat Earth thing, I can't get with it. I can't accept it. But I can accept the fact that galaxies are flat. Now, if you ever look at a galaxy and you look at a spiral galaxy, at least most of them from what I've saw are flat. If you look, the Milky Way galaxy is flat. So my thing is how, you can accept a flat Earth, a flat galaxy, but you can't accept a flat Earth. I think that's pretty interesting.
What else is interesting is, any meteorites, whatever they are, wherever they're coming from, whatever comets, everything's coming in across a flat ecliptic. Everything comes in from a flat angle, that passes us, because it's going over a flat surface. If we were in the heliocentric model, everything would be coming in from all different angles. They'd be coming in, wrapping around from every angle in every direction, but everything just goes right across the flat plane.
Right. You never, ever will see a shooting star shooting up from below the horizon. So if you're standing on the beach at night, you'll never see like a shooting star launching up as if like someone shot off a rocket or something. You will never see that. The shooting stars always come down, always. And I challenge anybody. I mean, if you're living out in like a really open area and you check the news, find out when there's a meteor shower, go out there and take a look. The shooting stars will always come down. They don't come up. So, yeah.
That's an interesting point that you might make there, Mike. It's one that I hadn't actually considered before. And this is just another reason why it's important that people talk about these things, because there are so many aspects to all of this that no one person can think of all of them. The more we talk about them, the more we can start getting the ideas around our heads. In the live chat, Chili Rooster is one of these commenters who I've never been able to work out, but I think Chili Rooster's heart is in the right place. And he or she is always asking about Halley's Comet. Now, since you spent all the time talking about the galaxy, do you have any thoughts on Halley's Comet? Chili Rooster claims that it comes back every 76 years. Are you familiar with this, and do you have any thoughts on how that might be the case on a flat Earth model?
I'm familiar with Halley's Comet, but I have not looked into it enough to give a really good answer on it. I mean, yeah, I don't really know about
And I think
Halley's
that's a
Comet.
really important thing too, Mike, is there are so many aspects to this. There's nothing wrong with us saying, you know what, I don't have an answer for that right now.
Right.
And I think a lot of people who are, I call them hopelessly devoted ball earthers, they're so desperate to cling on their spinning ball model that they want to put people like us who question this stuff on the spot, and it's almost like they're going to say, aha, if there's any one thing that we can't answer, even though they've got all of these other problems with a spinning ball. It's almost like that they put the onus on ball earth skeptics to explain aspects of the flat earth model. I'm not even a flat earther. I'm sitting here pointing out the problems with a spinning ball, and I'll be happy to believe in a spinning ball if they can point out the problems. Then pointing out back to me or to you something that we don't understand on the flat earth model doesn't make the ball earth true, and I think that's the most important thing that we can focus on here. Matrix, at the moment we're talking about the galaxy and some of the problems with it. Do you have anything you want to add to this segment of the show?
Yeah, well, the imagery that we see, I mean, this is allegedly NASA, puts out all these different images of Earth, the composites and so on, and
Right.
This is a big part of what we're, questioning this whole shape of the Earth thing. I mean, it seems rather absurd that, it's been like 43 years since the last photo, official photo of Earth, and the one they released is quite funny, and it's got subliminal messages in it, like the word sex, and so on, and NASA is really behind this whole model of the universe. And so when we start to look at galaxies, these images of galaxies supposedly provided by the Hubble telescope, they can take these amazingly beautiful pictures, but they can't take a photograph of Earth, a really good one. They supposedly have satellites in space, geostationary orbit, tens of thousands of miles away. They should be able to, showing us live footage of the Earth, and they can't. They show us this, these very few spinning Earth videos where the clouds don't change and so on. And so all this brings us to question alleged space travel and from the moon landings to the International Space Station. And this whole investigation, that nothing appears to be what we've been told it is. And now the sky has become this mysterious thing. And I mean, stars are souls. I mean, do you think stars are souls? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know, and I wanna. It's just a concept. It's just a theory. It would be foolish for me to sit here and say I know for a fact when I have never been up there. So I want everybody who's listening to say these are just concepts based on biblical, ancient scriptures of ascending upwards. That's all it is. I can't confirm it. I sure hope that would be a possibility. I think that would be pretty cool. But as far as me knowing for certain, I don't know for certain. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's an inspirational thought. I mean, it really causes us to question everything, that we're being told about the sky. I mean, what the moon really is. Is it a spherical object, that you can land on? What is the sun? What are the planets? What are the stars? And
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. As you're talking, all of these ideas are coming to me, and I just get so passionate. I just get so passionate about it. But I did my last test, my last video I put up on my YouTube channel, my very last one where I tested the moon's temperature, and I kind of did it sloppy. I know there's others like Mr. Thrive and Survive, I believe his name is.
Yeah.
He did one, Gabriel the Architect, Ashley Webster, she did the same thing. All of us came back with the same results. It's colder in moonlight than it is in the shade at night.
Well, I'll tell you what, I know I've been doing this all show. I do apologize. That's another one that I've got on the rundown for today because I actually did one of these experiments myself just recently. And I'm looking forward to talking about the moon, just focusing on the galaxy for the moment. You guys should be able to see a screen share right now of the plane of Halley's Comet. Now, one of the things that I always repeat to people is even if you want to believe you're on a spinning ball, I highly encourage people to spend some time really looking into the heliocentric or Copernican model because it seems to me that most people, we get trained from a very tiny age to believe that we're on a spinning ball. And maybe in some classes we're taught to memorize the order of the planets and we get taught a little bit about the so-called Big Bang or whatever, but the actual instruction on how this whole model is supposed to work is generally pretty sparse. So I think for a lot of people, even if you want to believe in the spinning ball, that's fine. Just go and look into the heliocentric model properly and see what it involves. Now, what you guys should be able to see here is the orbit of Halley's Comet around the Sun. And as you can see here, it goes well past Uranus, Neptune. It goes all the way out. And so the idea is, and hopefully people who are watching this can see my cursor, the idea is that it goes nice and close to the Sun, and then it bounces all the way, it goes this way, it bounces all the way back out, and then it will come back again. And Chili's Rooster is asking, how would the flat model explain this? I'll just say to Chili and myself personally that if you look at the different models that there are, not just flat models, but the ideas to explain what happens in the sky, if I were you, I'd look into Tycho de Brahe. I think I'm mispronouncing that. I think he was Dutch, so the pronunciation can be tough there, but there are different models out there to try and understand what happens in the sky. There's no one unified flat Earth model for it, but if I could try and make it a concise summary, the idea is that what happens up there is almost independent of the shape of the Earth. It's almost like its own, I don't want to say life force, but it's its own thing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that, the planets rotate around the Sun, but there are models that still have that, and Tycho de Brahe, his model does that. His model still has the planets, and I think even the comets rotating around the Sun. He's simply saying that we don't also rotate around the Sun. There's something else going on in the sky. Have you looked into people like Tycho de Brahe yourself there, Mike?
Actually, as you're talking about this, an idea came to me when I was studying planets, and so this is going to go right into Halley's Comet. Halley's Comet. Well, all right. And I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to dive into Halley's Comet here in a second, but I want to set the stage. There are no planets. Planets don't exist. What you're seeing is celestial bodies, is what I call them. The reason I don't call them planets is because planet goes with the heliocentric model. What I want people to understand is that everything, the stars and the moon and the sun, all rotate above you. Okay, so they can calculate, and they know when the next time Mars is going to be in a certain location. So they can determine where this other celestial body, which we call Halley's Comet, is going to be at a certain time and a certain date. They know that. They don't even know. Most people don't even know how many planets are in our solar system. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's floating around above us that we don't know what it is. That's the thing. That's the deal. So I don't really know, when people say Halley's Comet, I don't really know what I'm looking at. That a comet is just a word. Am I looking at a planet? What am I looking at when you tell me a Halley's Comet? And so that's one of the things that I'm really on the fence about, because after I went to the observatory and found out there are no planets, they don't exist, it all kind of goes out the window at that point. So now I'm like, okay, what am I looking at? When you tell me Halley's Comet's coming, what am I looking at?
I'm very glad you make that point, Mike. And again, we can't repeat this too often. If you're 20 years old, then you've had close to 20 years of indoctrination into the worldview, a universe view that there are these spherical or close to spherical objects floating around up in the sky. But really, all we can see, even with good telescopes, is light, a small amount of light that might look circular, and it potentially might seem like it could be spherical, but all we're really seeing is light. And most of the time when we see that light, in our mind we imagine spheres because that's what we've been shown on TV and in textbooks. But as we've already discussed, those pictures are make-believe. So you've got no real reason, based on the observations you can make, to believe that these things are giant balls, let alone that they're giant balls floating around in space. All you can see is light, and you're quite right, Mike. When we call them planets, we're kind of buying into that heliocentric model. Of course, things like Venus and Jupiter, they used to just be called the wandering stars, and that's because when they're in the night sky and they're bright, they're just as bright as, if not brighter than stars. And I promise we will move on to the next topic soon, but just on this one, I better throw to you there, Matrix. Do you have anything that you want to add to this conversation about the plane of Halley's Comet? And before you do, let me read out a comment from the live chat. Robert A says that image, the one that I'm showing right now, doesn't show the supposed corkscrew motion of the sun, since the sun is also supposedly moving through space. So how does the comet keep up? And of course, those people who've looked into this themselves will know that the story is that the sun is flying through space, and the planets are supposedly, on the heliocentric model, making a corkscrew motion around the sun as it flies. And then you have to ask yourself, how could gravity maintain the orbit of the planets as it does? I'll see if I can screen share a video of that in a moment. It's utterly ridiculous, and the whole topic of gravity for me, I could sit here and pick holes in it for days. But I want to throw you the Matrix. Anything you want to add on the question of the galaxy and the problems that it has for the Copernican model?
Yeah, well, whatever Halley's Comet is, it's in our solar system. So, if the sun on the flat model was only like about 3,000 miles away or less potentially, there is just a smaller, downsized version of what the universe could be and how things work. We really don't know what they are. The wandering stars, like you described, that's how they've been perceived for a long time. Really up until NASA came along, and then they give us these pictures of planets, pictures of Pluto, pictures of Saturn, and great in detail video footage of Saturn and then this and that, and it all seems to be CGI. And so our whole idea of what we're seeing in space, including the Earth itself, it's all been CGI composite images. So this, if it was really what they said it was, they should be able to show us proper photos of these things, whether it's the Earth or the planets. So there's definitely a big mystery. And as for like the spiraling through the galaxy, following the sun, and how the moon and the Earth and the planets all sort of spiral around it and held in place by gravity, whilst the sun's moving at 600,000 miles an hour or whatever it is, and we're orbiting the sun at 66,000 miles an hour. And I think that's the speed. And whilst we're hurtling through the universe at light speed, the sun is. So the galaxy is, and so it's just absurd. I mean, how the moon, does this loop around the Earth, and the Earth does a loop around the sun. It's like almost a perfect circle. It should be, 1 minute it's speeding up to catch up with the sun. And then the next minute it would be slowing down as it comes in front of the sun. As it goes around the side of it, it would be speeding up. As it gets around the back of the sun, it would be, as the sun's moving forward all this time, at fast speed.
Here's the model we're supposed to believe.
Gravity can't really account for how it's holding the planets in perfect lockstep, and
right.
Because yeah. Go on, mate.
Oh yeah. No, that's absolutely perfect. Absolutely correct. I think, in my opinion, I think that all the planets that we're seeing are also CGI. I think that the planets that you're looking at, or the so-called planets, whatever people think they're seeing, are actually CGI. The really big observatories, they're getting fed it through GPS. Okay, now the smaller ones that you will go in and you would look at, they are using a telescope. And let me just give you an example, because I did this in my video called Planets Don't Exist, and a lot of it got edited out simply because I was trying to condense it. okay? But the observatory does not account, it does not calculate the rotation of the Earth. And how do I know this? Is because if you're on a ball, if you're on a globe, the people at the equator are spinning faster than the people who are at, let's say, the Tropic of Cancer, whatever, like at the top towards the North Pole, right? Am I correct on that? Is that the Tropic of Cancer right up top?
I think so.
Right, I believe it's the Tropic of Cancer. Like I didn't like once I get it in my head, I realize it's BS. I don't retain it. I throw it out, move to the next thing. But right at the top, the people in, let's say, Europe will be moving slower than the people in Brazil, in the South America, because they're on the equator, right? So, you know, I forgot the technical term, but basic geometry says that if you're on a ball, the wider the circumference, the faster it spins, because it has to keep up. So not only that, that's the first point. The second point is that each planet is traveling at a different rate of speed. So Saturn is moving at one rate of speed, which I don't remember the exact number, and Mars is moving at at a certain rate of speed. They're both moving at different rates, but when they turn the telescope to look at Mars, and then they turn the telescope to look at Saturn, they don't adjust for the revolution going around the sun of the planet. I don't know if you guys are following what I'm saying. Each planet is moving at a different rate of speed, and the telescope has a machine in it where it keeps up with the actual rotation, but they don't calculate the different speeds of each planet. So that right there is a dead giveaway. It's a dead giveaway. And I've seen it. I watched them set it up. Yeah.
Mike, I'm not sure if you can see this on your browser, but this is a video. Now, this one, I have to say, isn't from NASA themselves. This is what somebody's put together based on their interpretation of the heliocentric or Copernican model. Right. And what it shows for listeners listening on MP3 is the sun traveling through space, because of course, even on the heliocentric Copernican model, the sun isn't staying still. It's hurtling through space. Right. 77,000 miles an hour, some ungodly speed. And anyhow, if the planets are still rotating around the sun as it does this, then it has to be following what they call a corkscrew motion. And so that's what the viewers can see right now on the screen. Now, no matter how you interpret gravity to work, ask yourself how it could work like this. It's actually very amusing to me. Do you have any points you'd like to make about this, Mike?
Oh, man. You know, the heliocentric model, it's so easy to debunk that it becomes hard to debunk it, because you're pointing out the most obvious things, like for number one, the gravity. How come the planet, see, according to Einstein, is that space is bent. So the Earth is so dense that it actually weighs on space, and space curves in. So just like if you took a bowling ball and you dropped it in the center of a trampoline, and then you took a whole bunch of marbles and you threw it around the bowling ball, all of the marbles will eventually fall into the bowling ball. It would roll down right to where the bowling ball is. This is how Einstein's theory of general relativity, and which also, by the way, the theory of relativity also supports the geocentric model, right? Because Einstein's saying that the Earth could be at the center of the universe. Why? Because it's all relative. So depending on where you're standing, if everything's moving, if you're standing on Earth and you see everything moving around you, then theoretically everything is moving around you. So theoretically it's geocentrism. So in other words, Einstein supports geocentrism, and I don't even think that most people really know it. But the planets should be falling in. The moon should come crashing down to Earth at some point. They say over millions and billions of years it takes for that to happen. I don't know how they're calculating this. I would love to see how they're coming up with these numbers, but just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've spent a lot of time on the galaxy, and there's still some more topics we wanted to get through. If you're joining us late, this is the Baller Skeptic Roundtable, episode 9. We've got Where the Stars Are Souls. Mike, which city are you in, by the way, Mike, if you don't mind me asking?
Wait, I'm sorry?
Whereabouts are you based in the US, man?
Oh, I'm in Florida.
Florida. And
Yeah,
yeah, we're already
Florida.
90 minutes into the show, guys, so I hope you don't mind going a little bit over time because there's a couple more topics we did want to talk about. Just quickly, did you want to touch on the moonlight experiment? Now, before you do, Mike, I'll just say for the listeners, there are a number of leading flat earthers out there. Eric Dubay is one of them, and they say that the moonlight, not only does it not reflect heat from the sun, which you would infer that it should do if it's reflecting light, it actually sends down cold light, and they say that this is evidence that the heliocentric model is wrong. Now, a number of people, especially lately, have been doing their own experiments to see if it's true that the moonlight is actually cold, and you're one of them, Mike. So explain to listeners who aren't already familiar with it what you did to test this and what the results were.
Okay, the results. Let me say this first. That most of my videos that will be coming out will be mostly tests. I'm big on tests. I want everyone to perform the test. Like I want everybody, because most of the tests we can do in our backyards. And I think that observing ourselves really is real science, is by doing the test yourself. All right, so that's the first thing. So when I did the test on the moon, because I did hear Eric Dubay say it's colder in the moonlight, I have a friend named Ashley Webster. You guys could check out her channel too on YouTube, Ashley Webster. She did the moonlight test, and I got excited. I said, you know what? I'm going to go out and do this because I can't believe this. And I have my doubts. And so I grabbed a bunch of stuff, and I went down to the beach, and I grabbed me a little thermometer, and I tried to test the different metals in the shade and in the moonlight. It came back that it was always colder in the moonlight, but I didn't know if it was the wind that was actually causing the difference in temperature. So I came back home where there was no wind, because where I'm at, the house is surrounded by trees. So so there was really no wind coming in, but there was a little space where the moonlight was. And so I left a piece of metal in the moonlight, and I left one in the shade. The one in the moonlight was 3 degrees colder than the one in the shade, most times that I tested it. So that to me was a huge clue. I think more tests needs to be done. I don't think it's the end-all be-all test. It's the conclusive test that everybody should just go by. I think we should practice more, and everybody should just try different experiments. My next experiment, I'm using a magnifying glass to focus the moonlight, because that really is going to really tell. Because if the moon is reflecting sunlight, that moonlight should be hot, to some degree. I mean, it may not be scorching, but it should be. You should feel a little something. You should feel maybe like a little bit of a heat, like when you walk too close to the stove or something. Like, how come we don't feel that at all? It's almost like the moonlight has it's its own light almost. Okay, so I don't know. I think the verdict is still out on that, so I'm not going to say it's absolutely true, but I think the clues are very heavy.
Well, I've got some points that I want to make about this one, Mike, because I find this aspect fascinating. But before I do, I'll throw it to the other members of the roundtable. We've got with us Matrix Decoder live from Spain via London. Matrix, any thoughts you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think everyone doing these tests are important, like the curvature test, like the Bedford level experiment, and the moonlight test as well. It's another one. The moonlight thing perhaps doesn't prove or disprove flat Earth, but what it does, it disproves the official mainstream view of the solar system. And right. This experiment is an indicator, and from the various videos I've seen on it, there seems to be this several degrees drop in temperature, Fahrenheit at least. When people do Fahrenheit and have digital laser, digital thermometers, laser thermometers, and so I think it's really fascinating part of it all, and I encourage people to do these tests, and we're going to learn a lot more, and more people that do them, we can get better results.
Mm-hmm. I have a way that I'd love to see somebody that has the equipment to do it, because there's so many variables, as you said, wind, the ground might be warmer over next to the tree in the shadow. I'd like to see somebody get 2 digital thermometers, put them out in the shade in the shade. And and have the numbers be exactly the same and leave them there for however long, and then just literally take a piece of cardboard and an umbrella and put it over one of them at a distance, just blocking the sunlight, like, you know, in the sun on the beach where you put an umbrella above you, you're instantly cooler. And I'd like to see, you know, the umbrella, you know, I guess you have to have it in the moonlight and then put the umbrella on, and it should get warmer. You know,
Right.
and do it from as high far away that you can get, so you're not, like, you know, sheltering heat raising from the earth or something, and that would be pretty definitive to me.
Yeah. What results did you get, Mike? What with your?
I got a 3-degree difference in the moonlight. You know, it varied. It varied. Sometimes it would show up 1 degree, or sometimes it'd be 3 degrees, sometimes it'd be 4 degrees, but it varied. And like he said, there's, you know, wind factor, and so my next test will be indoors. But you know, it definitely came back that more often than not, I would say 95% of the time, it was colder in the moonlight. Now, what are the causes for that? I don't know. I'm you know, I'm speculating from this point, but it was definitely colder in the moonlight.
Well, I'll add this. I did the same experiment. We had a full moon, obviously, on Thursday last week, so I went down to a local park and did a very rudimentary experiment. Now, I was lucky there was no cloud cover, so I had direct moonlight. I used 3 simple outdoor thermometers, and I put one of them in the shade as a control group, 1 in direct sunlight, and then 1 I had in in moonlight rather, and then I had 1 in moonlight where I used a magnifying glass to magnify the moonlight onto the ball of the thermometer. And of course, if this theory is true that moonlight is cold, then what should have happened is that there should have been a greater drop in temperature in moonlight than in the control, and there should have been an even greater drop on the thermometer underneath the magnifying glass of the moonlight. My experiment didn't show any change in temperature. Now, I said while I was doing the experiment, this wasn't going to be proof for or against the theory. It was just one experiment, and I think it's terrific that so many people are doing that now. I did mine with simple mercury outdoor thermometers. Other people like yourself, Stasio, used a digital thermometer. Somebody else used, he actually had like a big setup with a metal, I'm not sure what it was, like a big metal bar with an umbrella.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so different people are using different methods. I had a bunch of people comment on my video saying that you can buy these water thermometers for fish tanks for like one pound. Probably cost me $5 to get them sent to Australia. So I'll invest in some of those. And the more of us doing these experiments, the better. And if you're just listening to this show and you've never even listened to people talking about flat Earth theory, you might be wondering, why on earth does this? What does this have to do with the flat Earth? I guess the logic is that if you can prove that moonlight is in fact cold, which isn't, it's almost an outrageous claim that moonlight is cold, right? If you can prove that that's true, then straight there and then the heliocentric model comes crashing down. So it's almost like, to me, it's a free hit against the heliocentric model. You prove that the moonlight is cold, you've got to reject what we've been told. You have to start from scratch. But if we can't prove that the moonlight is cold, that doesn't then mean that the spinning ball model is correct. And we can't repeat this enough. It's not the case that if you can shoot down one flat Earth model or another flat Earth model, it means the spinning ball is correct. There's a ton of problems with the spinning ball model that you have to get over before you can believe in it, if you're being intellectually honest. And we don't have too much more time to spend on the moonlight experiments, but just quickly, Mike, do you want to let the listeners know how many more videos you've got coming on this topic and when they can expect to see them?
I'm just going to do one more video on the moonlight really quick on using a magnifying glass. So that's going to be the next one. And then I'm going to move off of that and go back onto the flat Earth topic. You know, to believe in the heliocentric model takes a real stretch of the imagination. And when I say that is because I believed in it. So this is not a belittling. I'm not belittling anyone. I'm just saying that once you come off of the heliocentric model and you look back, then you start to realize, like, wow, I believe that. So a lot of stuff starts to really come to light after you when you get off the heliocentric model.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, Mike, it's not something that can just flick quickly. I would ask the listeners, especially if they've come to this through other so-called conspiracies like Sandy Hook or Boston bombings, or like Cassidy's Day or Elliot Rodger, or like the many lies of the world wars or Vietnam, whichever avenue it was that led you to be listening to this in the first place, I just ask you to remember back to when you first found evidence that your initial understanding was incorrect. Remember how long it took you for you to get over the cognitive dissonance. And then remember that what we're talking about right now, this goes right back to probably when you were 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years old. There's a lot of conditioning that has to be undone before you can begin to even really consider the flat earth models. So that's what you need to do, is just stick at it. Don't let 1 or 2 hurdles stop you. Keep thinking about it, and with many of these things, you'll get your head around it. And as you can see from listening to myself, Matrix and Dirth tonight, and our special guest stars of Souls, they're live from Florida, none of us pretend to have our heads around all of this ourselves, but it's a matter of bit by bit thinking about it, and it really is a fascinating line of inquiry. And what will happen is when you finish doing that, you might come up with your own model of the universe that you're in. Now, Mike, we're already up to almost a full 2 hours. Can you stick around for another 30 minutes tonight? We'll go a little bit over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm enjoying this. The time's going quick. Let me just read out a couple of comments from the live chat. Earth Shook Run says that if gravity bends light, then how is the speed of light measurable? Very good question. I've got some points to make about that later.
Yeah.
Manga4774 says, awesome of you to get Stars Are Souls on the show, John. Well, I can't actually take credit for this one. I host the show, I moderate the chat, but Matrix and Dirth take care of the guests, and I'm not sure which of those two got in touch with you, Mike, but I can't take the credit. They should, and I'm glad that we've got you on board as well. It's been a good show so far. The topic that you wanted to talk about, you brought this up in pre-show, Mike, was the various models of the flat earth. Now, it's important for people to understand that there's no one leader of anything, let alone the truth movement, let alone the flat earth movement. If you even want to believe it's a movement, everyone should be doing their own research. I have my own understanding of how the universe works. Matrix has his, Dirth has his, and Mike, I know that yours is a bit different to some of the others, so do you want to take a couple of minutes now to explain to people?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely, and I'm going to dive right into the whole thing. I'm going to freestyle it now, because that's how I talk best when I'm just going. And the thing is, I think that, all right, I made a video where I came out and said that, Math Boylan, he's great, blah, 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 blah. And, the guy he's very charismatic. He's a comedian. And so he does a photo or painting, which is excellent because it really gets people to think. But I have to say there's no leaders. The only leader is yourself. You don't follow me or anybody. Follow yourself and do the experiment yourself. You'll learn a lot doing that. Now, as far as math, I'm not going to dog him out. I'm not going to say anything slanderous or anything like that, but I will say that, people have to really understand there's no leaders in this thing. And sometimes we let our egos get a little bit carried away, and, I have to just say that. So now, Math Boylan was the first one to come with what we call the infinite plane model. There's real 3 main models that are that people have in their minds. The first one is the edge, that, we live on a pizza. Imagine a pizza. The center would be the North Pole. The outer crust would be what you would call Antarctica, the ice ring. And if you go too far over this ice ring, you eventually fall off into infinite space. That's the edge. So basically it's a pizza. It's a flat earth model with an edge. All right? That's the first model. The second model is the dome, meaning that you have a pizza, right? I'm using the pizza analogy, but you have also a dome over top. So meaning that if you go too far south or to the outer ring, you're going to run into a glass wall or whatever. You're going to run into, or maybe, like Mark Sargent says, the enclosed system, which is a very possible system. All of these, every model's possible because I don't know. And I want to let everybody know I don't know what the truth is, okay? There are certain clues that I can look for, because another thing, too, that we have to understand is that there are a lot of people in NASA who want the truth to come out. There are people in NASA who want the truth to come out. That's why they're giving these photos. I mean, the last photo they gave us with Pluto, it had the freaking Pluto on it. You guys remember that, right? So they're making it just so easy for us, right? And so, right, now see, this model here is where I don't necessarily follow this model, simply because the way I look at things is that if I can't see it and I can't physically test it and observe it, then it's not true. And so that's the standard that I go by. So when I see this curvature, or this indentation, this convex or concave Earth, then, because it's sort of concave, it's not all the way flat. When I see
Well,
that,
Mike, I apologize. Let me just interject just quickly. We have a lot of people who watch us live or on delay on YouTube, but a number of people re-upload these shows on mp3 to their own websites, and I personally have no problems with them doing that. So I should explain to people who have the audio and not the video. What we're looking at right here is the map of the square and stationary Earth. Now, I'm not sure who put it together, or I think it's the Orlando map. I think Matrix can correct me in a moment. But just quickly, if I could explain it to people who can't see it, it's almost like a hubcap, and I've heard people refer to it as a hubcap. If you just imagine the globe as you know it, but instead, and go from the North Pole down to about the equator, imagine it almost like a globe, but instead of going around, it tapers out and then comes back up again, and it depicts the moon and the sun and a third object in the sky rotating almost like on a compass, if you like, from the North Pole. I'm not sure if I explain that terrifically well, but Matrix, can you just expand on that? I know that you've looked into this a little bit further than I have. Is this the Orlando projection? Is that right?
If I'm not mistaken, it's the Orlando Ferguson map. Could be wrong about that. I mean, what you're describing here really is like a roulette wheel. I think that's one of the best ways to describe it. As you see in like casinos. So I mean, this is one of the versions. It does seem to be a little kind of convex and concave, and for me it doesn't really gel with the whole idea of water leveling out, and oceans being curved and so on. So I kind of have an issue with this map based on those ideas.
Absolutely, yeah. The water, there is, because we've done the test. Like, we didn't wait for NASA to tell us there's no curve. We've went out on lakes where I've seen, when I was at the observatory, they had a telescope where I was able to see 40 miles out. There was no curve at all. So when I look at this model, I never observed a curve in the tests that I've done. So I don't know. It may be true, but I just don't think there's enough evidence to support it. But this is one model. The other model is the model with the dome, where you're going to run into a glass wall, or Mark Sargent will call it the enclosed system, where if you go too far to Antarctica, and Antarctica would be the outer ring, right? Like on a pizza, it would be the outer crust. If you go too far past that, outside that ring, you would eventually run into really bad hail, storms and everything else, just to prevent you from going any further. So that's what I would call the dome model. And then you have the infinite plane model, which is basically there is no edge, and the landmass just keeps going on and on and on, maybe forever. And then there's other colonies where there's other sections where people are living with another sun. Now, I think that even that, I think there may be, because I did a video called "They're Hiding More Land," and I do think they're hiding land. But is there a dome? There could be a dome, and I want to let everybody know that when I say they're hiding land, that's only speculation. There's no way I can prove it one way or another until I go to Antarctica myself. So I haven't done that. So I want to put that out there for a lot of people, because I got a little bit of backlash when people say, well, you made some good points here, but you don't know for sure. And I'm going on record saying I don't know. I don't know what the shape of the Earth is. I think most likely, that there's more land that they're hiding. But I do think at some point you're going to run into something that's going to prevent you, simply because we've only ever seen one sun. We haven't seen multiple suns. And so this was the falling out that Math and I had about the model. And the Flat Earth movement has splintered, because you have some people who believe in the model, what we're seeing here, which is the Hebrew model, which has the firmament going over top. Okay, so again, I go with the extended plane. I do think there's a limit, but I do think they're hiding more. Something they're hiding, because they have the UN treaty where all the nations, or the Antarctica treaty, where all the nations, 47 nations, are working in concert with each other to keep anybody from crossing Antarctica. And I can explain that in detail later. Hello?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they are, definitely hiding something. I mean, the question is, what is it? Is it the infinite plane, or is it,
I
or is it the dome? They're definitely
okay.
hiding something.
Here's what I think. This is just my opinion. I think they're hiding land. I think they're hiding God, and I think they're creating scarcity. So I think when you say that there's a limited amount of land, you create scarcity, and it also supports the fact of the whole evolution theory, the Big Bang theory. It supports all of that. So that's part of the reason why they put Antarctica, positioned it right perfectly at the bottom. I mean, if you think about it, Pangea wouldn't even work on a sphere. Pangea won't work on a sphere. It will work on a flat surface, but it won't work on a sphere. And I'm gonna do tests about that later and just show you. Like if you took a cookie and you broke it apart, the cookie would break in pieces, but you couldn't get a cookie on a ball. And I'll go over that later. But the whole thing is that there really is no set model, and I think we should explore. I created a petition so that and I think I have like 200 signatures or something, but I created this petition where I want people to go and try to get the Antarctica Treaty modified so that we can go and start experimenting and seeing what's out there. Because there's no curve. So that means that we're on a flat surface. What's beyond our line of sight, I don't know.
Yeah, we're definitely being.
Can I just say for the listeners, we've moved on to the second model. We looked at the Orlando Ferguson one earlier on, and that was the roulette wheel, like a hubcap. And I think that's the one that Mark Sargent, or is roughly similar to what he subscribes to. What we've got on the screen right now, you referred to it as the Hebrew model earlier, Mike. It's the one with the firmament at the top, and apparently this is somewhat similar to what is suggested in the Bible. And this one has the big dome at the top and the stars, the moon and the sun within the dome, and the idea being that we're enclosed, and so are the stars, the moon and the sun enclosed within it. We should say, again, if you're new to this flat earth theory, that according to most flat earth models, the sun is not millions of miles away, the moon is not hundreds of thousands of miles away. They're much, much closer than that, as are the stars. And this is another one of the models. It's the dome one. And you said earlier, Mike, that the third of the three major models that you're familiar with is the infinite plane one. It would be remiss of me not to throw to Dirth right now, because he's a big fan of what he calls puddle theory. And since we are towards the end of the show, the least I can do is let him talk about it. So, Dirth, as I bring up a picture of the infinite plane, do you want to explain why it is that you're so attracted to it?
It just makes the most sense. Again, it's just theory. There's no proof. But, if you have the Antarctic ice wall, past it is an endless plane. And what as Carl Sagan said, what a waste of space. Well, what a waste of a flat plane not to have other thermal pockets with other capacitors, suns, melting, out the water and creating oceans and land. As you were talking before, Mike, about the concrete, when you zoom in on it, it has hills and valleys. Well, that's exactly what we have. You got your mountains and you got your oceans, hills and valleys on a flat plane, and the water settles out. There's reports, and none of them are substantiated, about two suns in Antarctica. I believe that it's very possible that we're seeing at the right time one of those other, suns from another thermal pocket coming close to the edge of our puddle, maybe a couple hundred miles, maybe less, maybe more. Who knows?
Right. If you look at this map here, we can see how Brazil fits directly into Africa. And we can see how all of the continents sort of fit in like a jigsaw puzzle. So at one point, all of the continents, I believe, if this map is anywhere remotely close to the truth, that the continents were together. When they split apart, that some of that land went out of view. So there's more than 7 continents. And this is why, if you look, I urge everyone to go watch that documentary I put out. It's called They're Hiding More Land. And I have some guest stars in it, guest appearances. I would recommend everyone going watching that, because Admiral Byrd claimed to see, according to what his documents said that he saw a sun for 45 minutes. It was a green sun, him and his men. Okay.
Right.
So there are accounts of what they call mock suns or dog suns in Antarctica, which pretty much they're telling people they're just fake suns, but there's suns out there. So that's a possibility. I think we should definitely explore and go see.
Didn't Admiral Byrd say that he flew into the Earth? And to me, he's flying across the ice plane. He came across another thermal pocket and flew down. Maybe it was only 2 miles high. And he felt like he was flying into the Earth and found another tropical land, another thermal pocket, another what we call Earth. Whether it has a different name or not doesn't matter. It's just semantics. And I believe that there are endless thermal pockets.
Absolutely, because a lot of people have a problem with me saying that there's an infinite plane, but if you think about an edge, so if you're telling me if I walk to this edge, I'm going to fall off into infinite space and just keep falling, it doesn't make sense. So this is the greatest mystery in human history. Like, there's no mystery greater than this. Like, because the infinite plane will boggle your mind. The edge will boggle your mind, and the dome will boggle your mind. Like, there's no way, no matter which way you turn, you're going to be left in confusion because the creator is powerful.
The heliocentric model, of galaxies and other planets and, extraterrestrials perhaps finding our little speck in this cosmos, that boggles my mind. The infinite plane is the simplest explanation of them all. I mean,
oh, yeah.
It just makes a ton of sense, and there's an easy way to prove it. Just let us fly over Antarctica.
Right. And I personally think they will. And here's the thing. If there is more land, I think there's a way in. Now, if we look at how we have the shuttle Challenger, then we have Atlantis, and then we have Endeavour. So if you look at the sequences of these space shuttles, one of them says Atlantis, and then it says Endeavour. So Atlantis, now Plato have wrote about Atlantis. So Atlantis could be a real place that is beyond the ice. In fact, we don't even know if it's ice out there. That's another thing. Not all of Antarctica is icy because some of it is still water because of the high salt content. So some of it, according to the reports, now I don't know if this is true, but according to the reports that there's so much salt in the sea, in some of the waters out there, that it doesn't actually freeze. So you can theoretically get a boat and just keep sailing on and on until you reach the other pocket. That's a possibility. But again, this is all speculation. I don't really know, but I put that video out there so I want people to look at all sides of this thing. That's really what I want people to do.
And can I just interject there very quickly, guys? John LeBron here. I just want to make the point that right now we're speculating about the different models that could be used to explain the so-called universe that we're in. My take has always been that I'm interested in disproving the claims that are easily falsifiable, like so much of the Copernican or heliocentric model. Yeah. And earlier in the season, I was a little bit hesitant to get into this speculation about the models on this show because I felt like just having a general skepticism about all of this was more healthy. And as David freely admits, he's got no actual proof that there are other puddles out there. It's just speculation. We can't prove the dome and we can't prove the hubcap as far as I'm aware. So all of these models are speculation. And I prefer to stick to just debunking the spinning ball model. But I've come to understand over the last few weeks that for a lot of people, they've spent their whole lives believing in this gigantic universe with billions or trillions of stars and so much out there that for them to just give that up and have nothing to replace it with, correct or false, that's too difficult for them. Their mind needs to believe in something. So I can see for some people, they can't just give up the ball. They need to either believe in an infinite plane or a dome or a hubcap. They need something to replace the spinning ball with. And if it helps them to at least conceptualize some of the problems with the spinning ball, then I don't see a problem with it. But I just want to make it clear for the listeners, I don't personally have feelings one way or another about the dome or the infinite plane or the hubcap, because to me, that's not important to me personally right now. All I'm trying to do is show that there are so many problems with the spinning ball and Copernican model that only a hopelessly devoted ball earther could look into this story for themselves and come away and honestly claim that they still believe in the spinning ball. Now, we've got a couple more topics that we want to touch on, but before we do, you did speak briefly, Mike, about some of the other leading flat Earth proponents, and you said right at the start of the show while we were warming up that you think there are people who've been put here to distract us or discredit or divide us. You can speak as much or as little as you want to on this topic, but since you've already touched on it early in the show, do you want to let people know what you mean by that, and then we'll go around the round table?
Absolutely. What they've done is just how when you turn on television and you see Barack Obama and President Putin, right? And you'll see them sitting across from each other, and they appear to be bitter enemies, but in reality, they're not enemies at all. Because how can all of these nations, North Korea is supposedly a terrorist nation, they have nuclear weapons, right? First of all, the nuclei has to be perpetuated by everybody. You can't have that. And when I say everybody, I'm talking about, all right, there are no governments. That's the main thing. The people who run this planet are people in authority, and they are royal families. Okay, so now I'm not going to say who's at the top of the pyramid, but that's all I can tell you, that it's royal families who are ruling this thing. Now, and they're usually run by secret societies, just like a gang or, a mafia, the mob, just like the mob. Watch The Godfather. That's exactly how it's set up. And so since there's no government, what they do is they send in people that they control. So they'll put on TV, they'll have Obama and Putin, and they'll pretend like they're going against each other when in reality they're both working for the same people. And so it's the same thing with the Flat Earth so-called movement. They install their guys who are talking about Flat Earth, and then they'll use them to lead the herd. So that's basically what they're doing, and they'll use them as divide and conquer strategy, because that's their biggest weapon. Because if they could get us divided up, then we can never get strong enough to go see what's beyond the ice ring. And so that is what they're doing. They're installing and I'm not going to call any names. I'm not going to call any names because I don't know. That would be speculation. I can't say for sure who's what we call a disinfo agent. I will just say anybody who's making any claims that cannot be verified, you have to step back and have a level of suspicion.
Well,
so
Stars,
when
I say this? Yeah. I hate to interject. Can I say this? I'm at the point now where I think the notion that there are shills out there is enough of a psyop in and of itself, because it causes paranoia. And for a lot of people, the moment that they think, oh, this guy might be my enemy, their mind freezes up and they can no longer take in new thoughts and information. So if you can simply convince enough of the so-called truth community that there are these shills out there spreading disinfo, that's all it would take. You wouldn't even have to actually pay any shills to go down to that level. All you'd have to do is make the people down there scared that anyone could be a shill, and you can freeze conversation. Because for a lot of people, their minds aren't powerful enough to think through, well, if this person is a shill, I'll work that out by listening to them. They simply stop listening. They don't have the power to think through it. And so for me personally, do I think there are potentially agents down at this level who are here to distract or discredit us or divide us? Sure, that makes sense to me. But I won't sit there and think this person's a shill or that person's a shill and stop listening. In fact, I'll do the opposite. If someone's a shill who's been sent here to do damage, that will become evident by listening to what they say and seeing problems with their logic, problems with their information, problems with the way that they treat other people, problems with their demeanor. It makes more sense to listen more. So for me personally, I try not to get into the arguments about who is or isn't a shill, either on the air or off the air, because to me, it doesn't really seem to help that much. All it does is really take up our time. But for a lot of people, this is very significant. So I do want to go around the round table. We'll go to you there, Matrix. We've had a number of guests on the show. Almost every single one of them has been accused of being a shill at one point or another. I've been accused. I think Dirth has been accused. I'm not sure if you've been accused yet, Matrix, but it's only a matter of time. Do you have anything that you want to add to this general idea of them sending people down here to distract us?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is the hot topic of the moment, isn't it? In the truth community, if you want to call it that. So, I mean, if the powers that be, I mean, they might try and infiltrate it and steer it one way or the other, but I mean, on the whole, at this point, we're kind of a small amount of people, and you know, I think the powers that be were probably relying on the cognitive dissonance and the indoctrination and the ridiculing of the subject to, slow things down. But you know, as it gains strength and momentum, and more people look into it, they will definitely be using different tactics. I mean, you've got various politicians and scientists talking, trying to ridicule the flat Earth, like Obama has done several times, and so on. So they definitely, it's on the radar, and what with the release of these new pictures of Earth by NASA, the timing is just incredible. So I like to listen to all kinds of people, and and take their information, and it's more about the information than the personalities. But you gel more with certain personalities than others, and these kind of differences of opinion occur, and people should learn to agree to disagree, and because we're all trying to, the sincere people are trying to uncover the truth, and change the system. It's not just the globe lie. It's so much more to it. It's such a bigger deception. All over deception. So it all kind of ties in. And when you get one crack, it leads you to another. The crack gets bigger, and you find a different rabbit hole and a different avenue of investigation. So it all kind of ties in, and this whole flat Earth subject kind of gels it all together. So I expect to see various kinds of methods and propaganda, more propaganda from NASA and the powers that be, I guess.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Oh no, I was just going to say is that Matrix, you hit the nail right on the head, because NASA, and this is just my prediction, is that NASA is going to splinter. They're going to splinter. Their photos are becoming more ridiculous, not because they can't make good photos, it's just because they're kind of getting out of the business. You're not going to have NASA around 1,000 years from now. It's not like 1,000 years from now, fast forward, we're going to have NASA still doing the same thing over and over again. At some point, it's going to break down. Now, what is it going to turn into? I don't know. But I think they're going to splinter up, and they're going to privatize space. So they're going to have it where, because if they splinter up and privatize space, then nobody could take the blame for the fake photos. Do you see what I'm saying? So they can say, let's say you have NASA, right? They pretty much have a monopoly on space travel right now. Okay? But if they splinter up into, let's say, 10 different factions, right? And each department is doing their own thing. They can blame fake photos on one department while legitimizing the other ones. So, in other words, if they ever get caught red-handed, like faking a Mars mission, they can say, "Oh, it wasn't us; it was them over there. They faked the Mars mission. We still have credibility." And so, this is what I think they're going to eventually go to. So that's where I think it's going, because right now everyone has smartphones. We all have computers. We all can scrutinize the photos now.
Yeah, well said. And I want to go to Dirth there. He's been accused of being a shill more than most people on the panel. Dirth, what do you think of this idea that, let's just say that there are agents sent to distract or divide us at this level? Let's just say, for argument's sake, that's true. Doesn't it still make sense for the average person who's doing their own research, trying to get their head around all of this information, to still listen to whoever it is that seems to be making a good case, regardless of what we think their motives are, and make up in our own minds whether or not the information that they're putting out there is logically consistent, based on evidence, etc.? Doesn't it make sense to say, you know what, even if there are shills out there, I'm simply going to listen to all, follow none, and come to my own conclusions?
I think the ones that are accused of being shills are doing the most damage. Some of the biggest shills in all the subjects I follow are the ones that really made me look deeper. And without mentioning names, or I'll mention names, Alex Jones. He's supposedly this big shill. Well, he helped wake me up. He pointed out lots of things where I did my own investigation and came further. Mark Sargent, supposedly this big shill. Well, he's one of the first guys I came across that made me look deeper. Then I came across Eric Dubay. Now he's supposedly a shill. I don't know if anyone's a shill in this. Eric Dubay was supposed to be on Dark Matter Radio with Art Bell tonight, but he bailed at the last second when they added an astrophysicist to the debate, and he bailed for some ridiculous reason. I'm not exactly sure what it was. So now we have the Morgile is going to be on debating an astrophysicist tonight, midnight, New York time, on Digital Matter or Dark Matter Digital Network.com. It's the new Art Bell show. Most people know who Art Bell is. He's one of the original guys out there doing truth work or conspiracy work, whatever you want to call it. So Dark Matter Digital Network tonight, midnight, New York time. From the Morgile is going to be debating a big name physicist. They're not releasing the name right now. And that should be amazing. But the fact that they bailed on that, which has millions of listeners, really puts some suspicion in my eyes. So I have no idea.
I was wondering how you were going to get a shameless plug in there for Art Bell during the show, and you did that masterfully, my friend. You're very clever at that kind of thing.
It's not shameless because, shameless would be if I did it. I was supposed to be on the show, but I thought that Eric would be better. And then when Eric bailed, I said, you know what? The Morgile will do a better job than I can. I'm not the best orator, as you all know, but I pulled together information. I think the Morgile is going to be phenomenal. Everybody should listen. It's a free show, but it's on at midnight New York time. Good for you, John. It's in the middle of the day for you.
Well, what I'll make sure that I'll do is I'll try and put a link to that underneath this video on YouTube, so those who listen to this within a few hours of it going to air can then go and follow that link and listen to the Morgile. Of course, he was our guest last week. It was a terrific show. This is episode 9 of season 1 of this show, and in a few moments I'll tell the listeners about what we have planned for the rest of the season. But we are coming towards the end of this show. We've already gone over time, and it is midnight here in Brisbane on Thursday morning. So we need to wrap the show up, but we promise that if he wants to come on the show again, we'll get Stars Our Souls back on the show, because in the live chat, more than 90 people watching live right now. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. The people love you, Stars Our Souls, so hopefully you can come and join us again. But we do need to wrap the show up now. So what we'll do is we'll go around the round table, we'll get the final thoughts, and then we'll play out with the music. We'll play out with a song, but we'll start off with you there, Dirth. They're live in New York. Any final thoughts for episode 9 of the Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable? He's already off to go watch Art Bell. All right then, Matrix, mate, final thoughts for episode 9.
I was muted, sorry. I was just saying Stars and Souls did a great job, and I think he's just a normal guy, and no one's accusing him of being a shill yet, so therefore he probably is a shill.
Well, actually, I have been accused. I have been accused for the first time last night. Our good friend Matt Boylan. So maybe he'll turn around and he won't call me a shill just because we disagree on models. But, hey, it is what it is. I think it is what it is.
Yeah, okay. Well, cool, man. I mean, it's been great having you on, man. I love hearing you talk, and, it's fantastic, man. I'd love to spend more time, asking you some more. I've got more questions for you, man. Like how the importance of this subject is an existential one, and how this has affected you personally, like from a spiritual point of view, and so on.
Well, I'll tell you what, Matrix. I didn't have a song to play us out lined up, so I'll spend a few minutes getting that ready. If you and our guest Stars Our Souls want to spend a few minutes just briefly touching on that topic, and I promise we'll spend more time next time. But just briefly, that is a good point, Matrix. We should spend a few minutes on that. The existential consequences of this line of inquiry. We'll throw over to you there, Mike.
Okay, that's a great question. I became more spiritual. I know there's a creator, and I don't think the Earth is 4 billion years old. I don't think we evolved from monkey to Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon and what all these other variation. When you just look into it, there's so many holes in it. There's a creator. The mountain formations, that right there tells you everything. I can go on that next time I'm on the show, but we live on a very young, flat Earth. And that's the reality of it. So I think I became more spiritual, and I think a lot of others will too when they. I'm not saying you can't be spiritual with the round Earth, but the flat Earth really says that we were put here in a very special place. So there's not other planets that the Creator has to really focus on. He's pretty much focused on us. We're the center. And so I do think that. I also do think they're hiding more land, and we definitely need to explore. So all the possibilities are open. I don't really know what's going on. I just know the Earth is flat, and I know that they're hiding something. That's the only thing I do know. I'm not ashamed to say I don't know, but I definitely became more spiritual. That's for sure.
Cool, man. Yeah, I think it's such a profound subject. I mean, it really is to do with who we are, where we came from, and our whole existence. And that's one of the great things about this whole debate and the flat Earth debate and where it's all going. I mean, it really seems to be this whole scientific materialistic viewpoint that we've been, evolution, Big Bang, and so on. That most of us have been indoctrinated into, and this whole subject's kind of tearing that all down, and to me, revealing the Creator more than anything else.
Absolutely, and I just want to say also too for my listeners, or for your listeners, is to go subscribe to Stars or Souls. I have a book out called Beyond the Horizon. It's on Amazon. If you type Beyond the Horizon and Flat Earth, it'll come up under Mike Stars in the search bar. So if you just do that, go purchase the book. The book helps me continue to do the experiments. I got some really good stuff coming up, which I always got to keep under wraps because I don't want anyone sabotaging it. So, I'm talking about the agents out there, right? So I try to keep my experiments under wraps until I actually do it. And I got some really good stuff coming up. So your money definitely helps me go to doing that because obviously I don't have money where I could just do this as a full-time job all day long. So yeah, that's it, guys.
What kind of stuff do you got in your book? I mean,
pretty much it's a picture book. So, and it was done. It's only 45 pages long. It was really short because people wanted a picture book, and I wanted to put it out as soon as possible. I have another book I'm working on, which is going to be much more extensive, probably be like 300 pages long, and it's going to be a picture book as well. So it's going to deal with photographs of the horizon, and it's going to be so much better than what I've done before. So you guys could also, your listeners could also look for that. But that'll be out by the end of this year, so it's got some time for that. So that's pretty much what's coming up.
Cool, man. Just one other question for you. Sure. What about your man on the street interviews? Are you going to be doing some more?
Yes, I'm going to be doing that again. Actually, I'm setting up a table where I'm going to be, because it's right on the beach, right on the horizon, so I can show people, look, it's flat. Your eyes aren't lying to you. And I'm going to set up a table on the beach. I didn't do it because it didn't get the view count that I wanted. If the more views, I'm going to go out and do it again. It didn't hit the view count that I was looking for. My other videos did. So, but I'm definitely going to do it again. So I definitely want people to check it out because every time I do it, I'm waking people up. So people woken up. Like, even though a lot of them gave me nasty attitudes, a lot of them went home and Googled what I said. And who knows? Some of them are flat earthers right now. Who knows?
Yeah, it was cool, man. I really enjoyed it. It was just fantastic to watch you ask these people and see their reactions. The different kinds of reactions to all kinds of different people. And it's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to set up a table. I'm going to have flyers and pamphlets. That was my goal. And I'm going to record it all anyway. And I'm going to have a telescope right with me. So, yeah, I'm excited about that. Definitely.
Cool. And I just, to say thanks very much for coming on the show, man. It's been a pleasure having you on.
This has been if this is the best interview I've ever been on, period. All the other interviews I've been on were great, but this one has you guys. It was very organized, and I would definitely come back again. It's been an honor.
Well, that is a terrific way to wrap up the show. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us. I'll make sure I put the links to your book on Amazon. It's available in paperback and on Kindle. They can go and check it out. It's priced very reasonably. I've already paid $10 American for Dubé's book. I'd be silly not to buy a copy of yours, which I will be doing. I'll also provide a link to the documentary that you put together. It takes a long time to make videos. I think people who haven't done it before don't realize how much time goes into editing a video. My recent moon temperature video took me probably 10 or 15 hours in total of reviewing the footage, editing the footage, uploading it to YouTube, etc. There's a lot of time and effort goes into this. So for you to make a feature length, an hour and 19 minutes, I think it was, you know, it takes so much time and effort. So people should go and check it out, make up their own minds. And a point that we've made constantly over the course of tonight's show is that things won't always make sense the first time around, and none of us are paid professionals to do this. So if I say something that doesn't make sense to you, or if Matrix or Dearth or Stars Our Souls says something that doesn't make sense to you, don't use that as an excuse to stop looking. Use that as just a launching board to go and find someone else who might have a better explanation, and spend time thinking about it yourself. Not everything I say is going to be correct. Not everything that any of us on the panel says is always going to be correct. We try our best. You should be trying your best, and hopefully tonight you've gotten something, even if just one or two ideas you hadn't thought of before. I have. There were a couple of things we brought up tonight that I hadn't thought of before. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's meant to be collaborative, and so far I think through the 9 episodes that we've done, that's exactly what it's been. Now, for those of you who've been wondering, we are planning to wrap up the season after episode 12. So next week on episode 10, we've got Wakey Wakey lined up. And then for episode 11, we're hoping to get on a ball earther. Now, I've been sending out some emails to the professors and associate professors and heads of school at the universities near me, and I don't think that any of them will come on the show, but if they do, they'll be the guests for episode 11. If they don't, we're putting the call out to the YouTube so-called truth community, and we'll see if we can get on a ball earther to come on, not necessarily for a debate, but for a discussion. Let's see if they can make a strong argument that we should believe that we're on a spinning ball. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out an email. I've already got back some responses from some of these people. I want to read out one of those emails. Okay. And while I'm doing that, I also want to point out that on Monday US time next week, so it'll be Tuesday morning my time here in Australia next week, I will be in a debate, and there will be some civility and order and some structure to it. More information will come out in the following days. It'll be with me and Scully B. Kraken. He'll be taking the position that we are on a spinning ball, spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, spinning around the sun, spinning, spiraling through the galaxy, all that kind of stuff. He'll be arguing for that, and I'll be the one saying, well, I'm not so sure, and here are my problems, and it'll be 2 hours. Hopefully people enjoy it, and I'll provide a link to that underneath this video as well as soon as it becomes available. Let me just quickly read out an email. I sent emails out to, like I said, the heads of schools and professors of astrophysics and geography and all these kinds of things at the universities near me. I want to read out one of the responses that I received from an associate professor. And his reply went something like this. Hello, John. And by the way, my email to him, it was very polite, very civil, very non-confrontational. And here's the reply that I got back this afternoon. Hi, John. Pretty astonished to see that in the 21st century, people still believe that the Earth is flat. To seriously believe in such an idea requires a great deal of ignorance. Not sure why you would host a roundtable discussion with apparently completely crazy people. I don't think there would be any arguments at all to reach such people. Maybe let them draw a map of how they think the Earth does look, probably the North Pole in the centre and Australia and South America at opposite ends, and then ask them how it is possible that one can fly from Auckland to Santiago de Chile in less than 10 hours, about the same time it takes to get from Auckland to Japan, even though on a flat Earth the distance to Japan is just a fraction of the distance to Chile. To a flat earther, all airline pilots of all airline companies around the world must be highly suspicious. Same goes for people living in the Southern Hemisphere in general, so be careful. And as more of these replies come in, I'll be reading them out to the listeners, and in future I'll try and say to the people I'm emailing, is it okay if I read out your name and university? I haven't read out this gentleman's because I didn't check with him beforehand, but I can assure you that that is from a professor, an associate professor at a prestigious university near me. So like I said, episode 11, we'll try and get one of these guys on, but based on that email, might not be a very good chance. If we can't, we'll get a ball earther on, and then episode 12 we're going to wrap up the season. But right now we're going to play out with some music. Stars Our Souls, please stick around for the after show, but if you're listening to us live or on delay, we're going to wrap it up now for episode 9 of the Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable. We started on the 5th of August. For me here in Brisbane, it's now the 6th of August. And we'll see you guys at 10 p.m. Brisbane time, Wednesday next week. That's 8 a.m. New York time, 1 p.m. Brisbane time. And we're going to play out today with a song. It happens to be one of my favorites. It's from a guy who I don't really like anymore, but this song I still do like. This is Moby, We Are All Made of Stars. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.